Hello guys, welcome to Percy Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Percy read Naruto reincarnated in DxD with Harem of Rias? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Unstirred Surface. The bell didn't so much ring as it did shriek, a piercing, metallic sound that grated against Perseus Abaddon's nerves every time it signaled the end of another day at Kuo Academy. He packed his bag with an economy of motion that was second nature, the simple act of sliding a textbook into his satchel as precise as seating an arrow on a bowstring. Around him, the classroom erupted into the usual cacophony of scraping chairs, boisterous laughter, and hurried plans for the evening. It was a familiar, alien sort of chaos. He was a part of it, yet utterly separate, an island in a sea of blissful ignorance. He moved through the crowded hallways, a ghost in the machine. He was tall, with the lean, corded muscle of a swimmer, and his sea-green eyes held a depth that seemed to absorb the light around them. His black hair was a perpetually messy testament to a long-lost battle with a comb. To anyone who bothered to look, he was just Percy Jackson, the quiet transfer student from America with a slightly haunted look and an almost preternatural ability to appear exactly where you weren't looking. He had chosen the name as an anchor, a final, fading echo of a life that felt more like a dream with each passing year. Abaddon, his new family name, felt more honest. It meant, Destroyer, a role he was intimately, painfully familiar with. As he navigated the throng, his senses were a constant, low-level thrum of information. It wasn't just sight and sound. He could feel the subtle shifts in the building's energy, the way it cooled in certain areas and thinned in others. He knew, without knowing how he knew, that the Occult Research Club building was a nexus of power that made the hair on his arms stand up. He knew that the Student Council President, Sona Shitori, and our entire council moved with a synchronized grace that was anything but human. And he knew that Rias Grimori, the school's crimson-haired idol, radiated an aura of such commanding, aristocratic power. It was a miracle no one else seemed to notice. They were devils, all of them. He'd pieced it together over the months, not through investigation, but through a weary sense of pattern recognition. He had seen gods walk the earth, felt the chill of the underworld, and battled creatures born of primordial chaos. The energy signatures of the supernatural were burned into his soul like a brand. He recognized them the way a sailor recognized the constellations. And he wanted nothing to do with them. His first life had been a tapestry of prophecies, quests, and divine burdens. He had been a hero, a pawn, a weapon. He had saved the world and lost more than he could bear in the process. When a stray god's curse had finally sent him into the void between lives, his only regret was that he had never truly been his own man. Then, he had woken up here, in this new world, a baby in a new body but with the fractured, storm-tossed soul of a veteran warrior. He'd also come with an unexpected gift. In the ether between death and rebirth, he had somehow absorbed the entirety of a manga series from his old world. Naruto, a story of ninjas, chakra, and the will to never give up. The irony was not lost on him. He, who had commanded tsunamis, now possessed the intricate, tactical knowledge of a world where water could be shaped into whips, clones, and prisons. It was a terrifying, potent combination. This new life was his chance to be still, to be the unstirred surface of a deep ocean, not the raging tempest. He would go to school, get a job, and live a life so profoundly normal it would be an act of rebellion against the fates who had once owned him. He was just stepping out of the main school building, the afternoon sun warm on his face, when a flicker of movement caught his eye. Issei Hyodo, the undisputed leader of the school's perverted trio, was peeking through a window into the Kendo Club's locker room. Percy felt a familiar pang of secondhand embarrassment. Some things, it seemed, were universal constants. Still chasing that dragon, Issei? A voice drawled. Percy glanced over. Motohama and Matsuda, Issei's ever-loyal disciples in the art of fruitless voyeurism, were flanking him. Issei whipped around, a fire of righteous indignation in his eyes. It's not chasing. It's appreciating. We are connoisseurs of beauty. Percy offered a noncommittal grunt and kept walking. Their energy was harmless, if pathetic. It was the other kind that set his teeth on edge. As he passed the old, disused gymnasium, he felt it, a sudden, sharp spike of negative emotion. Fear, cold, primal, and utterly pure. It was followed by a wave of something else, an oily, corrupting presence that felt like stagnant water and week-old rot. A stray. His stride didn't falter. Not your problem, a voice in his head. The voice of his new vow for normalcy, whispered. You are not a hero anymore. You are just Percy. But the warrior's soul, the one forged in the heart of 100 battles, screamed in protest. It recognized the scent of a predator and its prey. His hand clenched into a fist at his side. He could feel the ambient moisture in the humid afternoon air, 1,000 tiny, invisible threads connecting him to the world. It would be so easy. A thought, a twitch of will, and he could form a blade of water sharp enough to sever steel. He forced his hand to relax. He kept walking. The fear spiked again, sharper this time, and was cut short by a choked gurgle. He stopped, his back to the gymnasium. The sounds of the departing students, the distant shouts from the sports fields. All of it faded into a dull roar. All he could hear was the frantic, terrified thumping of a single heart, and the slow, predatory crawl of the thing hunting it. He knew the girl, Yumi Tanaka, a quiet, second-year student from his literature class. She had once dropped her books, and he had helped her pick them up. She had a shy smile and smelled faintly of cherry blossoms. A perfect, normal girl who had just stumbled into the jaws of a world she never knew existed. Let the local devils handle it, the voice of reason said. Rias Grimori's territory, her responsibility. They would sense the stray soon enough. They would handle it, but how long would that take? Minutes. A stray devil, feral and unrestrained, could do an incredible amount of damage in a minute. He remembered Annabeth, her face pale, a dagger in her hand, standing between him and a monster. He remembered Grover, his goat legs trembling, but his pipes ready to play. He remembered the fierce, unwavering loyalty of those who had stood by him. The thought of walking away while someone, anyone, faced the darkness alone was a betrayal of everything they had been. Damn it all, he breathed out, the words a wisp of steam in the air. He turned, his movements fluid and silent. The boisterous energy of the school grounds was behind him now. Here, in the shadow of the old gym, the world was quiet. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and something coppery. Blood. He slipped around the corner of the building, his sneakers making no sound on the cracked pavement. The back door was slightly ajar. The energy signature was stronger now. A nauseating blend of demonic power and something else. Something tainted. It felt fundamentally wrong, like a beautiful song played with a single, jarringly off-key note that soured the entire melody. He had felt corrupted power before. Monsters twisted by Tartarus, demigods driven mad by curses, but this was different. This was a corruption of the soul itself, hollowing out of a being until only hunger and nihilism remained. He pushed the door open a fraction more and peered inside. The gymnasium was a cavern of shadows, with dusty shafts of late afternoon light cutting through the grime-caked windows high above. Old gymnastics equipment, pommel horses and balance beams, lay scattered like the bones of forgotten beasts. In the center of the room, he saw her. Yumi was on the ground, her school uniform torn, a dark stain spreading on her shoulder. Her face was a mask of sheer terror. Towering over her was a creature that might have once been human, or perhaps devil. Now, it was a mockery of both. Its body was elongated, its limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Its skin was the color of a fresh bruise, and its eyes were empty, black pits that seemed to suck the very light out of the room. A long, barbed tongue flicked out, tasting the air. It was a stray, no doubt about it. But the tainted energy rolled off it in waves, a visible distortion in the air around it. Its movements were jerky, spastic, yet held a terrifying speed. It wasn't just a feral monster, it was an insane one. This was what he had sensed. This was the wrongness. The stray raised a clawed hand, its talons dripping with a viscous black ichor. Yumi let out a pathetic whimper, a sound that broke the spell of Percy's inaction. The ocean inside him, so long held in check, began to stir. He didn't announce himself. He didn't shout a challenge. Heroes did that. He was just a survivor. He slipped into the gymnasium, a shadow detaching from other shadows. The stray was completely focused on its victim, its senses so consumed by bloodlust that it failed to notice the new presence. Percy's gaze swept the room, his mind a battlefield calculator. Distance: 20 meters. Target: distracted. Environment: high humidity, dusty concrete floor, multiple obstacles. Victim position: dangerous. He needed to end this. Not just win, but end it. Fast, efficiently. Before the girl was killed. Before the local devils arrived and started asking questions he had no intention of answering. He took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, he didn't just feel the moisture in the air, he commanded it. The change was imperceptible at first. The air grew heavy, thick, like the moments before a thunderstorm. The motes of dust dancing in the sunbeams seemed to slow, coalescing. He lifted his right hand. His fingers slightly curled. He focused his will, drawing on the memory of 1,000 ninja hand signs, the principles of chakra shaping now applied to a power that was infinitely more vast and primal. The water molecules in the air vibrated, pulled from the atmosphere, and gathered in front of his outstretched fingers. They didn't form a ball or a wave. They compressed, spun, and solidified into 5 needle-thin projectiles of liquid, each no thicker than a sewing needle but harder than steel. Senbon. The stray's arm began its downward swing. Percy's hand flicked forward. The 5 water senbon shot across the gym, silent and invisible messengers of pain. They struck the stray's descending arm not in the flesh, but in the precise locations of the wrist, elbow, and shoulder joints. There was no splash, only the wet, percussive thump of hyper-dense water hitting corrupted flesh. The stray's arm locked up, its swing ruined. It let out a screech of confused rage, its head whipping around. Its empty eyes scanned the shadows, finding nothing. Percy was already moving, a blur of motion, circling to its flank behind a stack of old floor mats. The creature's instincts were good. It sensed the general direction of the attack and charged, its claws tearing through the dusty mats, sending stuffing flying. But Percy was no longer there. He was now on its other side, his hand once again outstretched. This time, he drew moisture not just from the air, but from a puddle of stagnant rainwater near a leaky window. A whip of water, thin and flexible, pted from the puddle and wrapped around the stray's ankle. Percy yanked hard. The creature, for all its unholy strength, had its leg pulled out from under it. It crashed to the floor with a wet crunch of bone and a shriek of fury. It was fast, incredibly fast. It was already pushing itself up, its mangled arm twitching, its body contorting to face him. The tainted energy flared, and the wounds the senbon began to knit together with an unnatural, blackish ooze. High regeneration. Expected. He couldn't play games. He needed to overwhelm it. He stepped out from behind the cover of a pommel horse, finally revealing himself. The stray's black pits for eyes locked onto him. A wave of pure, undiluted malice washed over him, a promise of eternal torment. It was a familiar feeling. He'd had gods promise him worse. The stray opened its mouth, and a torrent of black fire, shot through with streaks of sickly purple, spewed forth. It wasn't hellfire, it was something else. A fire that burned not just the body, but the soul. The very air it touched seemed to decay. Percy didn't dodge. He stood his ground, raised his left hand, palm outward, and pulled. The moisture in the air in front of him, super condensed in a fraction of a second, formed a spinning, concave disk of water. It wasn't a solid wall, but thousands of gallons of water compressed into a shield a foot thick, rotating at immense speed. The tainted fire hit the water shield. There was no explosion, only a furious, hissing sizzle. The corrupting flames were doused, neutralized by the pure, primal element. Steam filled the gymnasium, thick and white and clean. Through the rapidly dissipating cloud, the stray charged, using the steam as cover. It was a good tactic. A shinobi tactic. But Percy could feel the water in its body. The vibrations of its movements through the moisture-laden floor. He was a sonar, and the monster was a submarine in a very small pond. He knew exactly where it was. Just as the creature's claws were about to break through the steam, Percy dropped the shield and took one step to his right. The stray's attack met empty air. In the same fluid motion, Percy's right hand, which had been gathering power at his side, came up. The water from the now dispersed shield coalesced around his hand, compressed, and formed a blade. It was a foot long, shimmering and translucent, the edge honed to a monomolecular thinness by sheer pressure. A water scalpel, the stray's momentum carried it past him. As it did, Percy spun on his heel and drove the water blade straight through the creature's back, aiming for where its demonic heart should be. The blade met unnatural resistance. The tainted flesh was tougher, denser than it should have been. But the power behind the blade was that of the primordial ocean. It pushed through. The stray let out a gurgling shriek as the blade pierced its core, but it didn't die. It spun, its other arm swinging wildly, claws extended. Percy dissolved the blade, the water splashing harmlessly to the floor, and ducked under the wild swing. He was inside its guard now, too close for its claws to be effective. He placed his open palm flat against its chest, right over the still protruding wound. He didn't attack, he pushed, not with his muscles, but with his will. He forced the water within the stray's own body to obey him. It was a horrific, invasive technique he'd only ever read about. A bloodline limit from the world of ninja he now inhabited mentally. But his control over the element was absolute. The creature's corrupted blood, its intracellular fluid, everything liquid within it, suddenly and violently expanded. The stray froze. Its empty eyes widened in what might have been shock. A series of sickening, wet pops echoed from inside its body as cell walls ruptured and organs turned to pulp. It swelled like a grotesque water balloon, its skin stretching taut. Then, with a final, wet bang, it imploded, collapsing in on itself. The sea Reacher dissolved into a cloud of black motes and foul-smelling dust, leaving behind nothing but a scorch mark on the floor and a lingering sense of violation. Silence descended upon the old gymnasium, broken only by the sound of Percy's steady breathing and the quiet, hiccuping sobs of Yumi Tanaka. The adrenaline, a familiar and unwelcome friend, coursed through him. The cool, detached battle focus receded, leaving behind the weary soul of a man who had seen too much death. The mask of the ordinary high school student was gone, shattered. In its place was the cold, ancient warrior. He walked over to the girl, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. He knelt, his movements careful not to startle her further. "It's over," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "You're safe." Yumi looked up, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. She saw not the quiet classmate from literature, but a figure of immense, terrifying power, his sea-green eyes glowing with a faint, residual light. She flinched back, scrambling away until her back hit a dusty balance beam. Percy sighed. He hadn't expected gratitude, but the fear was like a physical blow. This was why he'd wanted to stay out of it. This was the chasm that separated his world from theirs. He stood up, turning away from her. "Stay here. Someone will be here for you soon." He was about to walk away, to melt back into the shadows and try to piece his quiet life back together, when the air crackled with a new energy. It was sharp, precise, and smelled of ozone and roses. A crimson light bloomed in the center of the gymnasium, tracing the intricate lines of a magic circle on the dusty floor. From the light, 5 figures emerged. The first was Rias, her crimson hair a defiant banner in the gloom. Her violet eyes, usually filled with a confident warmth, were narrowed, sweeping the scene and taking in every detail with the speed of a master strategist. The unconscious but living girl, the scorch mark on the floor where the stray had died. And him. At her side, Akano Himahima, the school's other great beauty, had a serene smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. Tiny sparks of golden lightning danced at her fingertips. Yuto Kiba, the handsome prince of the school, stood with a hand resting on the hilt of the sword at his hip, his expression a mask of cautious neutrality. And slightly behind them, the petite, white-haired Kaneko Tuju, the school's mascot, stared at Percy with wide, unblinking golden eyes. Her face was impassive, but he could feel the coiled power within her, the readiness of a predator about to pounce. They had come prepared for a fight. They found only the aftermath. And an anomaly. Their eyes, all of them, fell on him. He could feel their senses probing him, trying to get a read on his power. His nature, his intentions. He remained perfectly still, a calm sea that betrayed nothing of the leviathan lurking in its depths. Well, Akano purred, her voice a silken threat. "It seems the party started without us. And who might you be?" cleaning up our territory. Kiba took a half step forward, positioning himself between Percy and his king. Rias, his energy, it's not human. But it's not devil, angel, or fallen, either. Kaneko said nothing, but her gaze intensified. She tilted her head, and in a soft, flat voice, she stated a simple, terrifying fact. He's dangerous. Percy met their stares, his own expression unreadable. He offered no explanation, no justification. He had acted. The threat was gone. The rest was just politics, a game he refused to play. Rias Grimori raised a hand, silencing her peerage. Her focus was entirely on Percy. She had felt the stray's tainted energy flare and then, just as suddenly, vanish. Her original plan had been to arrive, dispatch the creature with overwhelming force, and perhaps offer reincarnation to any promising human who might have stumbled into the mess. A standard, if unfortunate, Tuesday evening. But this changed everything. The power that lingered in the air wasn't demonic or holy. It was elemental, primal. It felt like the ocean itself, vast, ancient, and utterly untamable. He boy in front of her was not a potential pawn to be added to her chessboard. He was a piece from an entirely different game, one that had just overturned her board completely. She glided forward, her movements impossibly graceful, until she stood a mere 10 feet from him. Her peerage tensed behind her, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. Rias ignored them. Her violet eyes bored into his sea-green ones, searching for an answer. A hint, anything that would explain the impossible reality before her. She saw no fear. She saw no arrogance. She saw only a profound, soul-deep weariness, and beneath that, a core of tempered steel. Her initial intent to recruit, to command, to control, it all evaporated. It was replaced by a burning, desperate need to understand. She looked from his calm, steady eyes to the spot where a tainted stray devil had been utterly annihilated, and then to the terrified girl who was a witness to it all. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was not the charming two. Nay of the school idol or the commanding one of a high-class devil. It was quiet, stripped of all artifice, and held a weight that demanded an answer. Who? She asked, her gaze unwavering, and what, are you? Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A Grimori's Gambit. The shift in location was jarring. One moment, Percy stood in the dust and decay of the old gymnasium. The next, he was in a lavishly appointed room that smelled of old paper, expensive tea, and something else, something uniquely otherworldly. A crimson magic circle faded from the floorboards beneath his feet. He hadn't resisted the teleportation. Resisting would have meant a fight, and a fight would have meant revealing more than he wanted. For now, observation was his greatest weapon. The room was the heart of the Occult Research Club, a place he had consciously avoided for months. It was circular, with high, wood-paneled walls lined with bookshelves groaning under the weight of ancient-looking tomes. A large mahogany desk, fit for a CEO, sat at the far end. And a set of plush velvet couches formed a sitting area in the center. It was a room that tried to project an air of scholarly sophistication, but the raw demonic power humming beneath it all was like a bass note that shook your bones. Rias Grimori had already moved to the small kitchenette, her movements calm and deliberate as she prepared a pot of tea. It was a ASIC power move. Act as if this were a normal meeting, forcing him to be the one to break the silence. Akano stood by her side, a placid smile fixed on her face, though her eyes followed Percy's every breath. Kiba had taken up a relaxed-looking post near the door, his hand never straying far from his sword, while Kaneko had curled up on one of the armchairs, looking like a bored cat that could, at any moment, tear out his throat. The fifth member of their party, the terrified girl Yumi, was nowhere to be seen. Percy assumed her memory had been wiped, her mind patched up with a plausible story about a gas leak or a wild animal. It was a neat, clean solution. He wondered how many other minds in this town had been similarly edited to maintain the peace. Rias returned with a tray, setting it on the low table between the couches. "Please, have a seat," she said, her voice the smooth, practiced tone of the school idol once more. She gestured to the couch opposite her. Percy didn't move. He scanned the room again, noting the single window, the solid-looking door, and the 5 devils arrayed against him. He wasn't trapped. He could feel the network of water pipes running through the building's walls, the humidity in the air, The very liquid in the tea she was pouring. He had 1,000 ways out. That knowledge settled him. I'd rather stand, he said, his voice flat. Akino's smile tightened a fraction. My, so formal. Rias is only offering you some tea. I'm not thirsty, Percy replied, his gaze locked on Rias. He refused to be distracted by her subordinates. The king was the only piece that mattered. Rias finished pouring and placed a cup in front of her, the delicate porcelain clinking softly. She looked up at him, her violet eyes holding a calculated curiosity. You dispatched that stray, a tainted one, at that. The energy signature was unique. It was gone before we could even pinpoint its exact location. That implies a level of speed and lethality far beyond that of a normal human. It wasn't a question, but an invitation. An invitation to explain himself, to lay his cards on the table. Percy gave her nothing. It was a threat. I neutralized it. A threat on my territory. Rias corrected gently. While I appreciate the assistance, you must understand my position. An unknown power, operating within my domain, is a matter of great concern. She took a sip of her tea. Who are you? He had expected the question. He had no real answer to give. What could he say? I'm the reincarnation of a Greek demigod who also happens to have the tactical knowledge of a fictional ninja world. He'd be locked in a padded room before he finished the sentence. My name is Percy Jackson, he said, using the name on his school records. I'm a student here. That's all you need to know. I think not, Rias countered, her voice losing some of its warmth. What I saw, what my peerage can feel from you, is not something that belongs to a mere student. She leaned forward, her expression turning serious. You have power, Percy Jackson. In our world, power that is not aligned is a liability. It invites conflict. It attracts the wrong kind of attention. You cannot remain a ghost. She let that sink in before making her move. But power can also be an asset. You have potential. I could offer you a new life, a place in a world you clearly already have a foot in. I could make you one of my servants, a member of my peerage. She held up a hand, and a single, red, chess piece, a pawn, materialized in a swirl of crimson light above her palm. You would have a family, protection, a purpose. All you would have to do is serve me. The offer hung in the air, thick and heavy with demonic energy. It was the standard contract. The core of the devil peerage system. To Kiba, Akino, and Kaneko. It was the foundation of their very existence. They watched him, expecting a reaction. Awe, confusion, perhaps even fear. They did not expect the cold, quiet laugh that escaped Percy's lips. It wasn't a sound of humor, but of bitter, ancient irony. He met Rias's gaze, and for the first time, she saw the full, crushing weight of the worlds in his eyes. The wearing SS of a soldier who had fought too many wars, the cynicism of a man who had seen gods and monsters and found little difference between them. I bowed to gods once, he said, his voice low and resonant. With a conviction that shook the very air in the room. I won't make that mistake again. The silence that followed was absolute. Kiba's hand tightened on his sword. Akino's smile finally vanished completely, replaced by a look of shocked disbelief. Even Kaneko sat up straighter, her golden eyes wide. To reject a king's offer was one thing, to do so with such a contemptuous and baffling statement was another. It was a rejection not just of her, but of the entire celestial and infernal hierarchy. Rias was the first to recover, though a flicker of stunned anger crossed her features. You compare my offer to slavery under the gods. Quote, I compare it to a collar, Percy stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. You're offering me a different master, but it's a master nonetheless. I'm one being a piece on someone else's board. That is a grave insult to my king. Akino's voice was dangerously low, a low rumble of thunder before a storm. You should watch your tongue, human. Is it? Percy countered, his gaze shifting to her for a moment. Or is it the simple truth? Your loyalty is commendable, but it's not a path I'm willing to walk. He turned his attention back to Rias, who was watching him with a new, intense focus. The insult had stung, but she was a strategist above all else. His unprecedented reaction was a data point, one that changed all her calculations. So you would rather remain alone? A rogue element, she challenged. You'll be hunted. By us, by the fallen, by the angels if you draw their eye. No one can stand alone. I agree, Percy said, and the simple affirmation threw them off balance again. He took a step forward, closing the distance to the table. Which is why I'm not proposing solitude. I'm proposing an alternative. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the polished wood of the table, his presence suddenly filling the room. He was no longer a quiet student. He was a power broker negotiating terms. You have a tainted problem, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. That thing in the gym was wrong. It wasn't just a feral stray. It was sick, insane, its power corrupted in a way that felt like a plague. You don't know what it is, where it came from, or how many more there are. You're flying blind, and you're responsible for the safety of this town. He straightened up, his eyes sweeping over her peerage. You have a strong team. A knight with supernatural speed, a rook with immense physical power, and a queen who wields the thunder and lightning. You yourself possess the power of destruction. Impressive. But you're a hammer, looking for a nail. What you fought in that gym, and what's likely still out there, is a scalpel. A poison. You need more than just raw power to fight it. Rias's eyes narrowed. He had assessed her peerage's strengths with unnerving accuracy after only a few minutes. And you believe you are the solution? She asked, a hint of skepticism in her voice. I'm a solution, Percy corrected. I propose a contract, not of servitude, but of alliance. I will operate as an independent asset in Kuo. I will help you hunt these tainted creatures. I will lend my strength to the defense of this territory. In exchange, you provide me with access to your intelligence network. Everything you know about the supernatural world, the factions, the local players, and most importantly, this tainted corruption. Information for services rendered. We would be partners, not master and servant. The sheer audacity of the proposal left them speechless again. A human, a complete unknown, was proposing to treat with a high-class devil of the Grimoire clan as an equal. That is absurd, Kiba finally said, breaking his silence. The peerage system is absolute. There is no precedent for such an arrangement. Then let's make one, Percy replied coolly. He's mocking you, Rias, Akino said, stepping forward. He's a stray dog who thinks he's a wolf. He needs to be taught his place. Rias held up her hand again, silencing her queen. She stared at Percy, her mind racing. The insult to her pride and to the laws of her society was immense. Every instinct told her to refuse, to put this arrogant human in his place. And yet, the strategic implications were undeniable. He was right. They were blind. This tainted energy was a new and terrifying variable. And this man, this boy who spoke of gods and collars, had not only defeated one of these creatures effortlessly, but he also possessed a tactical mind and a type of power she had never encountered. To have him as a servant would be a great asset. But he had refused. To have him as an enemy was an unacceptable risk. To have him as an ally, an independent, powerful, and mysterious ally, the value was astronomical. It was a gamble, a wild, reckless, unprecedented gamble, and Rias Grimoire loved to win. A slow smile spread across her face, a genuine one this time. It was sharp, cunning, and held a spark of exhilaration. An alliance, she mused. Testing the word, a partnership. You have courage, Percy Jackson. I'll grant you that. She stood up, mirroring his posture from across the table. Very well, I will agree to a trial basis. You will assist my peerage in investigating the source of the tainted strays. Prove your value, prove your trustworthiness, and we will formalize this alliance of yours. But betray me, her voice dropped, the warmth vanishing, replaced by the chilling authority of a pillar of the underworld, and I will personally demonstrate the difference between a partner and a king. Percy gave a short, sharp nod. Understood. Where do we start? The trail was not hard to follow. The tainted energy left a residue, a spiritual stain that Percy could sense as a cold, greasy film on the world. To the devils, it was a foul odor they could track. They moved through the darkening streets of Kuo, a bizarre procession of school students on a mission that could shatter the fragile peace of their town. Percy walked slightly apart from the Grimoire peerage, a silent observer. He watched how they moved, how they communicated with subtle glances and shifts in posture. They were a well-oiled machine, a family. And he was the foreign object jammed in their gears. Akino's hostility was a palpable force, a low-level electrical charge in the air around him. Kiba was professionally distant, while Kaneko watched him with the unwavering intensity of a bomb disposal expert examining a ticking package. Only Rias seemed at ease, her earlier thrill at the gamble now settled into a focused determination. Their tracking led them to the industrial outskirts of the city, a place of abandoned warehouses and rusting fences. The tainted energy was stronger here, thicker, pooling in the shadows like spilled oil. "It's coming from that warehouse," Kiba said, pointing to a large, corrugated metal structure with boarded-up windows. "There are multiple signatures." "How many?" Rias asked, her crimson aura flaring faintly. "At least 5, Kaneko said, her voice flat. "And one of them is bigger. Stronger." They took up positions near the main cargo door. "Kiba, you'll breach first. Draw their attention. Akeno, air support. Kaneko, you're with me. We'll be the main assault," Rias commanded, her voice crisp and clear. She glanced back at Percy. "You, stay back and observe. This is our fight." It was a test. She wanted to see how he reacted to being sidelined. Percy didn't argue. He simply faded back into the deeper shadows of an adjacent building, his form melting into the darkness. He could feel the vibrations in the ground, sense the moisture condensing on the cold metal walls inside the warehouse. He had a clearer picture of the interior than they did. Kiba became a blur, his form dissolving into pure speed as he shot forward. The large metal door screeched open with a sound of tortured metal, and he was inside. A chorus of inhuman screeches answered him. A moment later, golden lightning lanced down from the sky as Akeno took flight, her black fallen angel wings spread wide, and blasted a hole in the roof, raining down judgment. Then, it all went wrong. From the hole Akeno created, 2 tainted strays with leathery, bat-like wings swarmed out, ignoring the lightning and charging directly for her. From the main door, instead of charging out, 3 more strays worked in perfect unison. One laying down a spray of corrosive black acid to block the entrance while the other 2 flanked, their movements coordinated, tactical. It was an ambush, a well-laid trap. "Akeno," Rias shouted, her own attack being blocked by the acid spray. Kiba was already engaged deep inside, the clang of his sword echoing out. Kaneko punched the ground, sending a shockwave of shattered concrete toward the door. But the strays simply leapt over it. This was not a pack of feral beasts. This was a squad. Percy didn't wait for an invitation. He saw Akeno falter in the air, our lightning strikes being dodged by the unnaturally agile winged strays. He saw Rias and Kaneko pinned down, unable to support their teammates. The time for observation was over. "Kiba, disengage. Fall back to the entrance, now." Percy's voice cut through the chaos, not loud, but carrying an authority that was impossible to ignore. It was the voice of a commander, a leader who had screamed orders over the din of clashing armies. Inside, Kiba, who was fighting back to back against 2 hulking brutes, instinctively obeyed the command without a second thought. He feinted, created a sword clone, and dashed back toward the relative safety of the doorway. "Akeno, stop the scattered attacks. Focus a continuous stream of lightning between the 2 aerials. Don't hit them, create a wall." In the sky, Akeno hesitated for a barest fraction of a second, shocked at being given an order. But the logic was sound. Her wide-area attacks were being evaded. She clenched her fists, and a solid, roaring beam of pure lightning arced between the 2 flying creatures, forcing them to swerve wide to avoid it. It gave her a precious second of breathing room. "Rias," Percy's voice was sharp. "Forget the acid. The metal wall to your left. Vaporize it." Rias didn't question it. She turned, her crimson aura exploding around her hand. A sphere of pure destructive energy hit the corrugated metal wall of the warehouse. It didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, leaving a perfectly circular, 10-foot hole. "Kaneko, through the opening. The one on the right is anchoring their formation. Break it." Kaneko shot through the new opening like a cannonball, her small frame a blur of white and blue. She smashed into the side of one of the flanking strays with the force of a freight train, sending it tumbling through the interior of the warehouse. The coordinated attack on the door faltered. In the space of 5 seconds, Percy had analyzed the tactical situation, issued 4 commands, and completely broken the enemy's strategy. He stepped out of the shadows, his hands glowing with a faint cerulean light. The lead stray, the bigger one Kaneko had described, finally emerged. It was larger, almost 8 feet tall, with mottled gray skin and an intelligent, malevolent light in its 4 black eyes. It saw its trap being dismantled and let out a roar of fury, not at the devils, but at Percy. It recognized the true threat. It raised its hands, and the very shadows in the warehouse seemed to deepen and stretch, coalescing into sharp, tangible spikes that shot towards the entire group. "Scatter!" Rias yelled, but Percy was already moving. He slammed his palms together, then onto the damp ground. "Water prison technique," he growled, the words feeling alien and familiar on his tongue. The puddles on the warehouse floor, the condensation on the walls, the very humidity in the air erupted. 5 spheres of churning, inescapable water instantly formed around the 5 tainted strays, trapping them in watery cages. The shadow spikes dissolved harmlessly against the swirling surfaces of the prisons. The peerage froze, their own attacks forgotten. They stared as the 5 monsters thrashed and struggled, unable to break free. Their tainted energy doing nothing to the pure, elemental constructs that held them. Percy stood before them, his expression grim, his eyes fixed on the leader trapped in the central sphere. "My turn." He walked forward, his pace steady. He raised his right hand, and the water from all 5 prisons was suddenly pulled from them. The strays dropped to the ground, disoriented. Just as a colossal amount of water coalesced above Percy's head, it churned and spun, drawing more moisture from the air, from the ground, from the very bodies of his enemies. It formed a miniature maelstrom, a swirling vortex of crushing pressure and razor-sharp currents, crackling with raw, untamed power. "You made a mistake," Percy said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it carried across the entire space. "You hunted us." He brought his hand down. The vortex descended. It did not create a flood or a massive explosion. It was a controlled, focused instrument of annihilation. The maelstrom enveloped the 5 strays, and for a moment, there was only the sound of 1,000 waterfalls, of a raging ocean storm compressed into a single point. The tainted screeches were cut off instantly. The very stone of the floor beneath the vortex was scoured and ground into dust. Then, as quickly as it had formed, the maelstrom dispersed. The water turned to a fine, clean mist that settled gently on the ground, leaving no trace. Where the 5 tainted stray devils had stood, there was nothing. Not a speck of dust, not a drop of ichor. They had been utterly, completely, and totally erased from existence. The silence that followed was heavier and more profound than any before. Akeno slowly descended, her wings tucking behind her, her face a mask of utter shock. Kiba stood in the doorway, his sword half drawn, his knuckles white. Kaneko stared at the empty space, her cat-like instincts screaming at her about the apex predator that stood before her. Rias Grimori looked from the clean, damp spot on the floor to the man who stood calmly in the center of it all. The power of destruction could erase matter. But what she had just witnessed was something else entirely. It was a cleansing, a scouring, the absolute, terrifying authority of an element made manifest. Her gamble had not just been to ally with a powerful piece. She had just sat down to play chess and discovered her new partner was the ocean itself. And he had just swept the board clean. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Feather and the Scale. The air in the Occult Research Club room was thick with unspoken questions. The 5 of them had returned in a flash of crimson light, leaving the clean scoured warehouse behind, but the events of the last hour had followed them like a shroud. The lingering scent of ozone from the battle and the faint, clean smell of rain from Percy's final attack clung to their clothes. No one spoke. The easy camaraderie of the Grimori peerage had been replaced by a tense, wary silence. Percy was the source of it, a gravitational anomaly that had warped their entire reality. He stood by the window, looking out at the darkening Kuo Academy campus, his back to the room. He gave them space, letting them process. He could feel their eyes on him, could practically hear the gears turning in their heads. He was an equation they couldn't solve. Rias was the first to break the silence. She sat behind her desk, her fingers steepled, her expression a mask of regal composure that barely concealed the whirlwind of thoughts behind her eyes. That was an impressive display of power, Percy. It was an understatement of such magnitude it was almost comical. It was a necessary level of force, Percy replied, not turning around. They weren't acting like strays. What do you mean? Kiba asked, his voice tight. He was polishing his sword with a cloth, a nervous habit that betrayed his inner turmoil. He was a knight, sworn to protect his king, and he had been tactically outmaneuvered and completely overshadowed. The way they attacked, Percy elaborated, finally turning to face them. His sea-green eyes swept over the group, analytical and cold. The winged ons went straight for your aerial support to neutralize the high ground. The ones on the ground used a suppression tactic, the acid spray, to pin down the heavy hitters while their flankers moved to encircle. The whole thing was a coordinated trap. Feral beasts don't fight with squad tactics. The room grew colder. He was right. They had all been so focused on the shock of the tainted power that the Y had overlooked the chilling intelligence behind its deployment. So they were being controlled. Rias surmised, her brow furrowed. Or trained. Trained, Percy confirmed. A controller would have a distinct energy signature. I didn't sense one. This was the work of disciplined soldiers. Someone is weaponizing these things. Akino, who had been leaning against a bookshelf with a deceptively placid smile, finally spoke. Her voice dripping with honeyed poison. And how would you know so much about military tactics, Percy-kun? You're just a high school student, aren't you? The question was a direct challenge. A verbal jab meant to expose him. Percy met her gaze without flinching. I'm observant, and I read a lot. He let the simple, infuriatingly vague answer hang in the air. He looked back at Rias. Hunting the grunts is a waste of time. They're disposable assets. We need to find the source. This, tainting, it feels like a sickness. And a plague has a patient zero. A focal point where the infection is strongest. His logic was, once again, brutally efficient and unassailable. Rias leaned back in her chair, a flicker of admiration warring with her caution. He thought on a different level. While she was thinking about her territory and her peerage, he was thinking about the entire battlefield, the logistics of the enemy, the root cause of the war. My family has extensive intelligence networks, Rias said, her mind shifting to this new, more proactive path. I can have them cross-reference any unusual energy readings or recent disappearances in Kuo that fall outside of typical stray devil activity. She began to type rapidly on a laptop that appeared on her desk in a shimmer of demonic energy. The screen was filled with flowing, archaic symbols. For several minutes, the only sound was the quiet clicking of the keys. Percy remained standing, a pillar of calm patience, while the others shifted uneasily. The dynamic in the room had irrevocably changed. Before, this was Rias Grimori's sanctum, her seat of power. Now, it felt like a war room, and Percy, despite holding no rank or title, felt less like a guest and more like a visiting general. I have something, Rias said finally, her eyes narrowing at the screen. Over the last 2 months, there have been 7 missing persons reports filed with the local police. All from the same district. All officia, LLY closed due to runaways, or lack of evidence. But according to our energy sensors, there has been a slow, steady buildup of a corrupting influence in that area. It's centered on a single locality. On the old Shinto shrine on Mikage Hill. Akino stiffened. The change was subtle, a slight tightening of her shoulders, the barest flicker in her eyes, but Percy noticed it. The shrine, a place of holy energy. For it to be the center of this darkness was a profound violation. A Shinto shrine, Kiba murmured. That shouldn't be possible. The sacred barrier, even a weak one, should repel demonic energy, especially something this foul. Which means whoever is there is either powerful enough to overwhelm the barrier, or they've found a way to poison it from the inside, Percy concluded. We go now. We should prepare, Rias countered, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. We know nothing about who or what is waiting for us. We know they're escalating, Percy shot back. They laid a trap for you. They know who you are. The longer we wait, the more prepared they'll be. Dusk is falling. The cover of darkness is the best we're going to get. His decisiveness was a physical force, pulling them all into his orbit. Rias looked at her peerage, seeing the grim agreement in their eyes. She gave a single, sharp nod. All right, we go. As the group prepared to teleport, Akino moved to stand beside Percy. Her smile back in place, but it was brittle now, like a porcelain mask. You enjoy giving orders, don't you? It must be thrilling, playing commander. Percy looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. He saw the elegant sadist persona she projected to the world. But beneath it, his senses, honed by a life of reading people in life or death situations, perceived something else. A deep, foundational pain. A conflict that was tearing her apart. The shrine's involvement had touched a raw nerve. He didn't rise to the bait. His reply was quiet, devoid of accusation. Anger is a shield. What are you protecting, Akeno? The smile on her face didn't falter, but her eyes went wide for a fraction of a second. He saw it. A direct hit. He had looked past the GHTNING and the teasing smiles and seen the scared child hiding in the storm. She said nothing, simply turning away as the Grimoire magic circle began to glow on the floor. But as they dissolved into crimson light, Percy knew their relationship had just fundamentally changed. They materialized in a grove of cedar trees just down the path from the shrine. The air was cool and heavy with the smell of damp earth. But something was wrong. The natural, life-affirming energy of the place was gone. The air was stale, stagnant. The birds were silent. The cicadas, which should have been starting their evening chorus, were nowhere to be heard. The entire hill was holding its breath. Kaneko was right, Kiba whispered, his hand on his sword. The barrier is almost gone. It feels sick. The shrine itself was visible through the trees. It was old and slightly rundown, but should have possessed a quiet dignity. Instead, it seemed to slink in the twilight, the wood of its beams looking dark and rotted. The paper of its prayer slips hanging like strips of dead skin. The tainted energy rolled off it in slow, invisible waves, a miasma of spiritual decay. Stay sharp, Rias ordered, her voice low. We don't know what we'll be facing. Percy took point without being asked, his movements fluid and silent as he led them up the stone path. His senses were screaming. The corruption was thick here, so thick he could almost taste it. Like ash and spoiled wine. He could feel the water in the soil, in the leaves of the trees, and it was sluggish, reluctant, as if trying to pull away from the shrine at its heart. They reached the main courtyard. A stone water basin for purification, the chozuya, was cracked, the water within it a black, oily sludge. The main hall, the Hayden, stood before them, its large wooden doors shut. The source of the power was inside. With a shared glance, Kiba and Kaneko moved to flank the doors, ready to force them open. But Percy held up a hand, stopping them. He walked forward alone, placing his palm flat against the ancient wood. He closed his eyes, focusing. He wasn't checking for traps. He was listening to the water. The wood of the doors, though old and dry, still contained trace amounts of moisture. Through it, he could feel the vibrations from within the hall. One person, standing perfectly still, the slow, steady rhythm of a heartbeat that was not quite human. The hum of a vast amount of power, coiled like a snake. Percy opened his eyes and looked back at Rias. One target, central room, waiting for us. It wasn't a trap, it was an audience. Kiba slid the heavy doors open with a low groan. The interior of the hall was dark, lit only by a dozen flickering candles that cast long, dancing shadows. The air was freezing cold and smelled of burnt incense and ozone. In the center of the room, surrounded by a complex, glowing circle of runes drawn in what looked like blood, stood a man. He was tall and slender, with long silver hair tied back in a neat ponytail. He wore the black, form-fitting combat gear of a fallen angel, adorned with silver pauldrons. He looked less like a warrior and more like a scholar, his expression calm, almost serene. He didn't look at them as they entered, his attention focused on a pulsating, shadowy orb of tainted energy that hovered above the ritual circle. He turned his head slowly, and his gaze, the color of amethyst, swept over them. He dismissed Rias, Kiba, and Kaneko with a glance. Then his eyes locked onto Akeno. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. So, the daughter of Barakiel has come home. The fallen angel said, his voice smooth and cultured. I am Tamiel, a humble servant of the cause. I must admit, I did not expect you to bring such unusual company. His gaze flicked briefly to Percy before returning to Akeno. What have you done to this place? Akeno's voice was a low growl, her usual teasing tone completely gone, replaced by a cold fury. Lightning sparked around her fists. This shrine, or one like it, had been her mother's world. This was a desecration. Done. Tamiel chuckled, A dry, rasping sound. I am healing it. This place, like all places in this world, was sick. It was weak, sentimental, mired in the pointless worship of fading gods. I am giving it a new purpose. A stronger purpose. He gestured to the shadowy orb. Behold, the power of the void. The cleansing touch of Erebus. You call it tainted. We call it purification. You're insane, Rias stated, her crimson aura flaring to life. Am I? Tamiel's eyes gleamed with fanaticism. Look at our world, Rias Grimori. The Great War ended in a stalemate of exhaustion. The factions have grown soft. Decadent. Your own brother obsesses over Japanese cartoons. Azazel collects sacred gears like toys. And your kind, you devils have diluted your bloodlines, breeding with humans, reincarnating any whelp with a shred of potential. You have forgotten that strength is the only truth. His venomous gaze returned to Akeno. Your very existence is a symptom of the disease. The daughter of a Kadri class fallen angel and a human shrine maiden. An abomination. A walking contradiction. Holy lightning from a creature of darkness. You are impurity made flesh. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, striking at the heart of Akeno's deepest insecurities. But it is not too late, Tamiel continued, his voice dropping to a persuasive whisper. The purity Kadri offers you a chance. This power, it can burn away your weakness. It can scour the human filth from your blood. Let it burn you, Akeno Himahima. Let it purify you, and you will emerge as you were always meant to be. A true daughter of the Grigori. That was it. That was the breaking point. With a scream of pure rage, Akeno unleashed her power. A massive bolt of holy lightning shot across the hall, aimed directly at Tamiel's heart. Tamiel simply smiled. He raised a hand, and the shadowy orb flared. A tendril of pure darkness lashed out and met the lightning bolt halfway. The two forces collided with a deafening roar, holy power and void energy annihilating each other in a flash of violent light. Let the lesson begin, Tamiel hissed. The fight exploded into chaos. Kiba and Kaneko charged, Kiba a blur of speed aiming to strike from the flank, Kaneko a sledgehammer of raw power aiming to shatter the ritual circle. Rias unleashed a stream of her power of destruction. But Tamiel was ready. Corrupted shrine spirits, twisted into shadowy caricatures of their former selves, rose from the floorboards to intercept Kiba. The very floor warped, tendrils of tainted shadow lashing out like whips to keep Kaneko and Rias at bay. His focus, however, never left Akeno. He met her barrage of lightning with his own attacks, spears of pure golden fallen angel light, twisted and wreathed in the same corrupting darkness. It was a mockery of her own power, a perversion of her heritage. Percy didn't join the fray. He stood near the entrance, his eyes scanning every detail of the battle. He saw Rias and Kaneko being bogged down by the endless, regenerating shadow tendrils. He saw Kiba expertly dispatching the corrupted spirits, but more kept rising. He saw Akeno, fighting with a fury born of pain, slowly being driven back by Tamiel's psychological and physical assault. They were losing. They were fighting Tamiel's power. They weren't fighting Tamiel. Percy's gaze fell to the ritual circle on the floor. It was the source, the conduit through which Tamiel was drawing and refining the tainted energy. It was glowing with a steady, malevolent light. That was the key. He began to move, not towards the fight, but around its periphery, a ghost in the swirling chaos of light and shadow. No one noticed him. Our attention was fixed on the spectacular duel in the center of the room. He drew the moisture from the air, from the flickering candle flames, from the very blood that had been used to draw the circle. He gathered it, compressed it, shaped it. You cling to your mother's power like a child, Tamiel taunted Akeno, parrying another lightning strike. But it is a lie. Embrace your father. Embrace the dark. Never. Akeno screamed, unleashing another, more desperate blast. At that exact moment, Percy acted. He didn't create a grand, dramatic attack. He made a single, precise move. From the shadows near the walls, a dozen streams of water, each no thicker than a pencil but moving at the speed of a bullet, shot out. They didn't target Tamiel. They targeted the circle beneath his feet. Each water jet struck a key, glowing rune in the complex diagram. The impact of the hyper-pressurized water was like a hammer blow. The lines of the circle shattered, the flow of energy violently disrupted. Tamiel cried out, not in pain, but in shock. His connection to the tainted power flickered, the shadows around him wavering. The shadow tendrils holding back Rias and Kaneko dissolved. His light spear faltered. For a single, critical second, he was vulnerable. His concentration was broken, his defenses down. Percy didn't move to attack. He looked across the room, his eyes locking with Akino's. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "He's yours." Akino saw it. In that moment of clarity, in that opening created for her and her alone, the rage and confusion in her heart coalesced into a single point of absolute, unwavering purpose. She was the daughter of a fallen angel. She was the daughter of a shrine maiden. She was not half of anything. She was whole. A brilliant, pure white light exploded from her. A pair of angelic wings, not the black of the fallen, but pure white, unfurled from her back alongside her devil wings. Her power skyrocketed. She raised her hands to the ceiling, gathering every ounce of her being. Her pain, her pride, her love for her mother, and her fury at this man who dared to defile her memory. "I am Akino Himahima," she screamed, her voice echoing with the power of both thunder and prayer. A pillar of golden light, thicker and more brilliant than anything she had ever summoned, descended from the heavens. It was not just holy lightning. It was the pure, righteous fury of a deity, focused and wielded by its chosen daughter. It struck Tamiel. He had no time to scream. The sacred, purifying energy hit the tainted power within him, and the reaction was catastrophic. He was consumed, vaporized, utterly annihilated in a silent, blinding flash of golden judgment. The light faded, leaving behind only the smell of rain and sanctified air. The tainted energy in the shrine was gone, burned away. The oppressive cold vanished, replaced by a gentle, natural warmth. In the center of the room, Akino stood, panting, her angel wings slowly fading. She was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming release of emotion and power. The battle was over. Rias and the others rushed to her side, their faces a mixture of awe and concern. As placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Akino, are you all right?" Percy walked over, his footsteps quiet on the purified floorboards. He stopped near the spot where Tamiel had been and picked up a small, leather-bound journal that had somehow survived the blast, its cover scorched. He flipped it open. The pages were filled with meticulous notes on the tainting process, detailed tactical plans, and frequent mentions of the purity cadre, and the guiding vision of their leader, Lord Barakiel. He closed the book and walked over to the group. He looked past the concerned faces of the others, directly at Akino. He didn't offer empty platitudes or coddling reassurances. He looked at the spot where their enemy had stood, then back at her, and offered a warrior's simple, honest praise. "Good shot." The words cut through Akino's emotional turmoil. It wasn't pity, it was respect, an acknowledgement of her strength, of the choice she had made, of the victory she had claimed. A small, watery, but genuine smile touched her lips for the first time that night. It was a beginning. As they finally prepared to leave the now peaceful shrine, Percy felt a subtle shift. Akino, as she walked towards the teleportation circle Rias was summoning, made a point to fall into step beside him. She said nothing, but the space between them was no longer filled with hostility. It was filled with a quiet, new, and profound understanding. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Phoenix's Shadow. A fragile peace had settled over the Occult Research Club in the week following the confrontation at the shrine. It wasn't calm, but it was a new kind of normal. The club room had transformed from a social lounge into a functional training center and war room. Percy had become a quiet, constant presence, an chore around which the others now oriented themselves. He rarely offered advice, but when he did, it was with a brutal, minimalist efficiency that cut straight to the heart of a problem. He was Curran, watching Kiba spar with Kaneko in a pocket dimension Rias had created for their training. It was a simple, grassy field under a perpetually twilight sky. Kiba was a whirlwind of grace and speed, his sword a silver blur. Kaneko was a bastion of immovable strength, her tiny fists deflecting his blows with impacts that sent shockwaves through the air. They were good, they were powerful, but their synergy was off. "You're fighting two separate battles," Percy's voice cut through the air, clear and calm. He hadn't moved from his spot on a grassy knoll, yet his presence seemed to be everywhere at once. Kiba disengaged, breathing heavily, and looked over at him. "What do you mean?" You're trying to get past her guard, Percy said to Kiba. And you, he glanced at Kaneko, are trying to counter his speed. You're reacting to each other. You're not controlling the fight. He stood up and walked onto the field. Kaneko, your strength is absolute. Don't just block him. Reshape the battlefield. A punch to the ground isn't just a shockwave, it's a trench that restricts his movement. It's a cloud of dust that blinds him. Kiba, you're too focused on the sword. Your speed is your greatest weapon. Use it to attack from angles she can't defend, not just to launch another frontal assault. He looked between them. Stop thinking like a knight and a rook. Start thinking like a single weapon. The simple, direct critique landed with the force of a physical blow. They looked at each other, a new understanding dawning in their eyes. Inside the clubhouse, watching on a magical projection, Rias and Akeno observed the scene. He sees things differently, Rias murmured, a faint smile playing on her lips. He doesn't see pieces on a board. He sees the whole board. Akeno, who was pouring tea, hummed in agreement. Her hostility towards Percy had evaporated after the shrine incident, replaced by a deep, watchful curiosity. He had given her the opening she needed, not to save her, but to empower her. It was a gesture of respect she had never received from anyone else, and it had forged a quiet, powerful bond between them. He doesn't think like a devil, or a human. He thinks like a survivor. It was in that moment of quiet reflection that the world caught fire. Without warning, the air in the orc room shimmered with intense heat. A brilliant, golden-orange magic circle, shaped like a magnificent, winged bird, erupted on the floor. It was not a polite arrival, it was an invasion. Flames licked at the edges of the rug and singed the velvet couch. From the heart of the inferno, a group of figures emerged. Leading them was a young man with blonde hair styled in a way that defied gravity, and an arrogant smirk plastered on his face. He wore a crimson suit with gold-trimmed that was ostentatious to the point of absurdity. This was Riser Phoenix, heir to the great house of Phoenix, a devil known for two things, his clan's legendary immortality and his insufferable arrogance. Behind him stood his peerage, 15 women, his complete set, all dressed in revealing maid outfits, their expressions a mixture of adoration for their master and disdain for their surroundings. Rias, my darling. Riser's voice was a booming, possessive drawl that grated on the ears. Your beloved Riser has arrived. I trust you've been keeping yourself pure for our wedding night. Rias shot to her feet. Her expression of calm contemplation instantly replaced by a mask of cold fury. Riser, you were weeks ahead of schedule. And you dare to use a Phoenix circle in Grimoire headquarters. Minor details, my sweet. Riser waved a dismissive hand, his eyes roaming the room before settling on her, his gaze lingering on her body in a way that was both proprietary and insulting. I grew tired of waiting. I decided to move our timetable forward. We'll be married by the end of the week. Just then, the pocket dimension collapsed, and Percy, Kiba, and Kaneko reappeared in the club room, materializing right in the middle of the tense standoff. Riser's eyes flicked over them. He noted Kiba's and Kaneko's school uniforms and dismissed them as servants. Then he saw Percy. He took in the plain clothes, the quiet intensity, the utter lack of a demonic aura. A flicker of contemptuous amusement crossed his face. And what is this? Rias, have you been collecting stray humans now? A new pet, perhaps. He is no pet, Rias said through clenched teeth, moving to stand slightly in front of her peerage. He is an ally of the House of Grimoire. Riser laughed, a loud, braying sound. An ally, a human. Don't be absurd. You Grimoires have always been soft, but this is a new level of foolishness. He stepped forward, his smirk widening as he looked Percy up and down. Whatever absurd game you're playing is over. I am here now. This thing is to be dismissed. I will not have my bride associating with such filth. Percy hadn't moved. He hadn't spoken. He simply watched, his sea-green eyes betraying no emotion. He analyzed Riser. The arrogant posture, the flamboyant display of power, the casual way he treated Rias like an object. He saw the same entitled pride he had seen in the sons of Ares. The same belief that power and birthright were one and the same. And he saw the pained, trapped look in Rias's eyes. She was a king, a leader, a woman of immense power and pride, being reduced to a political trophy. That is not your decision to make, Riser, Rias said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. This is my peerage, my territory, and my alliance. Wrong, Riser snapped, Hi's voice losing its playful tone and taking on a hard, cruel edge. It is all soon to be my territory. The contract is absolute. You belong to me. Everything you have belongs to me. He gestured dismissively at Percy. Get rid of it, or I'll have my queen burn it to ash. One of his maids, a tall woman with fiery orange hair, stepped forward, her hands already wreathed in phoenix flames. That was the line. No, a quiet voice said. Every head turned. It was Percy. He took a single step forward, placing himself between Riser's queen and Rias. His posture was relaxed, his hands in his pockets. But his presence had suddenly become the center of the room. What did you say, human? Riser snarled, his eyes narrowing. I said no, Percy repeated, his gaze locking with Riser's. His voice was still quiet, yet it carried an authority that cut through the tension like a blade. You seem to be under a few misconceptions. Let me clear them up for you. First, you are a guest in this room. An uninvited one. You will show the owner the proper respect. Second, Rias Grimori is your fiancée, not your property. She is a king in her own right, and you will address her as such. And third, he paused, his eyes turning to ice. You will not give orders to me or anyone in this room. That is not your right. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of his words stunned everyone into silence. Riser's peerage looked shocked. Rias's peerage looked terrified and thrilled in equal measure. A human was lecturing a high-class devil of the Phoenix clan on etiquette and rights. Riser stared for a long moment. Hen threw his head back and roared with laughter. Insolence. Oh, this is rich. You pathetic little worm, do you have any idea who I am? I know what you are, Percy replied, his voice still unnervingly calm. You're a bully who mistakes his family's power for his own. You're loud, you're arrogant, and you're used to getting your way because you can't be put down permanently. Your immortality has made you lazy and predictable. Riser's laughter died instantly, his face contorted into a mask of pure fury. You are going to die for those words. He is under my protection, Rias declared, stepping forward, her power of destruction swirling around her hands. And you will follow him to the grave. Riser retorted, this has gone far enough. According to the old laws, this insult to my honor can only be settled one way. A rating game. Rias's face went pale. A rating game. Her small, inexperienced peerage against Riser's full, battle-hardened set. It was a fight she couldn't possibly win. The stakes would be her own freedom. She began to steel herself, to accept the hopeless battle, because that was what a king did. She would fight for her family, even if she was doomed to lose. There's no need for a war, Percy said, his voice cutting in once more. This isn't about territory or politics. He says this is about his honor. He looked directly at Riser, a faint, challenging glint in his eyes. You think I insulted you. You think I am beneath you. This is a personal matter, between you and me. He took another step forward, the space between them crackling with tension. So let's settle it. Forget the rating game. Forget the peerages. A simple one-on-one duel. Just you and me, right here, right now. Riser stared at him, incredulous. You are challenging me. I am, Percy affirmed. The terms are simple. If you win, I walk away. I will leave Kuo and never trouble the House of Grimori or the House of Phoenix again. Rias will honor the engagement contract without further protest. He glanced back at Rias, a silent question in his eyes. She stared back, her mind reeling, but then she saw the absolute, unwavering confidence in his gaze. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. She was placing her entire future in this man's hands. And when I win? Riser asked, a predatory grin spreading across his face. He was salivating at the chance to personally tear this insolent human apart. If I win, Percy corrected calmly, you will publicly and permanently annul the engagement contract. You will leave Kuo immediately. And you will never again trouble Rias or her peerage. You will give your word, as a Phoenix. The offer was perfect. It appealed directly to Riser's arrogance and his pride. To refuse would be to admit that he, an immortal devil from a great house, was afraid of a single, nameless human. The chance to both secure his marriage and humiliate his fiancée's pet in one glorious battle was too tempting to resist. Riser Phoenix, accept your terms. He boomed. I will enjoy watching you burn. Rias's hand shot out, creating a pocket dimension that expanded to engulf the entire room, transforming it into the same grassy field as before. Riser's peerage and Rias's peerage were spectators on the sidelines, an audience for the duel that would decide Rias's fate. Riser immediately burst into flames, his body wreathed in the golden fire of his clan. A pair of magnificent fiery wings erupted from his back. Prepare to be erased, human. He roared, launching a massive fireball the size of a car. Percy didn't move, he simply raised a hand. The moisture in the air in front of him condensed, forming a thick, translucent shield of water. The fireball hit it and was extinguished with a tremendous hiss, creating a huge cloud of steam that obscured the entire battlefield. Riser shot through the steam, confident his senses could find his target. He broke through the cloud, his flaming fist ready to strike, and found nothing. Percy was gone. Looking for me. The voice came from above. Riser looked up. Percy was standing on a solid platform of water he had created in midair, looking down at him with a dispassionate expression. Before Riser could react, Percy stomped his foot. The platform dissolved into 100 high-pressure water bullets that rained down on the Phoenix air. Riser grunted as they pelted him, the force staggering him. But the wounds they created healed in moments, consumed by his own fire. Is that all you have? Pathetic water tricks, he sneered, launching himself into the air. The duel began in earnest. It was a battle of fire and water, brute force and tactical evasion. Riser was relentless, throwing enormous waves of fire, explosive fireballs, and jets of flame. He was a living inferno. Percy, in contrast, was like the tide. He never met the attacks head-on. He flowed around them, using mist to vanish, creating water clones to misdirect, and using small, precise attacks to test Riser's defenses. To the spectators, it might have looked like Percy was on the defensive, constantly retreating. But Rias in her peerage, who had seen him fight before, knew what he was doing. He wasn't just dodging, he was learning, he was analyzing, he was dissecting Riser Phoenix, piece by piece. After a few minutes of this cat-and-mouse game, Riser's patience snapped. Stand and fight me, coward. He screamed in frustration. All right, Percy's voice echoed from the dissipating mist in front of him. He stepped out, and for the first time, he went on the offensive. He didn't form a blade or a wave. He simply pointed his index finger at Riser. A jet of water, no thicker than a wire, shot out at unbelievable speed. It wasn't aimed at Riser's chest or head. It was aimed at his knee. Riser tried to dodge, but the attack was too fast. The water jet struck his knee joint. There was no blood, but there was a sickening pop as the joint was hyperextended and dislocated. Riser roared in pain and surprise, his leg buckling. The flames of his regeneration immediately began to work, snapping the joint back into place, but for a crucial second, his mobility was compromised. In that second, Percy was on him. He didn't go for a killing blow. He formed two small, hard spheres of water in his palms and slammed them into the sides of Riser's head, directly over his ears. The impact ruptured his eardrums. Riser cried out, disoriented, his sense of balance shattered. Regeneration kicked in, but again, it took a moment. Before he could recover, another water jet struck his elbow, dislocating it. Another struck his shoulder. Percy moved like a phantom, his attacks a blur. He wasn't trying to inflict lasting damage. He was deconstructing Riser's ability to fight. He was a surgeon, methodically disabling a machine. Riser was in agony, not from the pain, which healed almost as fast as it was inflicted, but from the sheer, utter humiliation. He couldn't land a single blow. He couldn't even properly see his opponent. He was being taken apart, joint by joint, sense by sense. Enough, he bellowed, unleashing a massive, omnidirectional explosion of fire, forcing Percy to leap back. The ground was scorched for 50 feet in every direction. Riser stood panting in the center of the crater, his body fully healed, but his eyes wild with fury and a hint of something he hadn't felt in centuries, fear. I am Riser Phoenix. I am immortal. You cannot defeat me, he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. Percy landed softly on the edge of the crater, his expression unchanged. Your immortality is a crutch. It's the only thing you have. So I'll take that away, too. He raised his hands. The air grew heavy, thick with humidity. The moisture from the entire pocket dimension, from the air, from the grass, from the clouds above, began to flow towards him. It was a gathering of immense power, a summoning of the very element of life. Riser watched, his arrogance finally giving way to genuine terror as a sphere of water began to form in front of Percy. It grew and grew, churning and swirling, until it was a perfect, massive orb of crystal clear water, 20 feet in diameter, hovering in the air. "What is that?" Riser stammered. "Your cage," Percy said simply. He thrust his hands forward. The sphere shot across the field. Riser tried to vaporize it with a torrent of fire. But the volume of water was too great. The flames were simply swallowed by the sphere. It enveloped him completely. Riser was trapped. He was suspended in the center of a perfect, inescapable prison of water. He thrashed. He struggled. He unleashed his flames, but all they did was heat the water around him, boiling him in his own power. He tried to fly, but he had no purchase. He tried to punch, but the water provided too much resistance. And then, the most terrifying part of the trap became clear. He opened his mouth to scream a curse, and water flooded his lungs. He couldn't breathe. His immortal body began to panic. His regeneration could heal any wound, but it couldn't create oxygen where there was none. He was drowning. He would not die. His body would eventually expel the water and regenerate any damage, but he would be trapped in an endless, suffocating cycle of drowning, reviving, and drowning again. For as long as Percy willed it, it was an eternity of torment. On the sidelines, Riser's peerage watched in horror. Rias's peerage watched in stunned, silent awe. They were witnessing a complete and total assertion of dominance. Inside the sphere, Riser's struggles grew weaker. His desperate, terrified eyes locked with Percy's calm, cold ones. Percy raised an eyebrow. The message was clear: surrender. Riser's body convulsed. He couldn't speak, but his will was broken. The fight was gone from him, replaced by a primal need for air. He gave a frantic, desperate nod. With a simple flick of his wrist, Percy dissolved the sphere. The water crashed to the ground in a massive wave, leaving Riser sputtering and choking on the scorched earth, gasping for air like a man truly reborn. He was defeated. He was humiliated. He was alive, but his pride, his honor, his very identity had been systematically and completely dismantled. Percy walked over and stood above him. "Do you yield?" Riser looked up, his eyes full of shame and hatred. But the fear was stronger. I yield," he choked out. The pocket dimension collapsed, and they were all back in the orc room. The singed rug and burned couch were a testament to the battle that had just occurred. Riser staggered to his feet, leaning on his queen for support. He couldn't meet anyone's eyes. He looked at Percy, a creature he had dismissed as a pet, who had just handed him the most crushing defeat of his long life. "A phoenix honors his word," he muttered, his voice a hoarse whisper. "The engagement is annulled." Without another word, he and his peerage vanished in a much less dramatic vortex of flame, leaving behind only the scent of their shame. Silence descended. Kiba, Kaneko, and Akino stared at Percy, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and reverence. He had faced an immortal high-class devil and had not only won, but had done so without taking a single scratch, achieving a victory so total it was almost cruel. Rias walked slowly towards him until she was standing just in front of him. Her violet eyes were shimmering with unshed tears, not of sadness, but of overwhelming relief and a profound, bone-deep gratitude. The political nightmare that had loomed over her for years, the future she had dreaded, had been erased in a matter of minutes. He hadn't just won a duel. He had given her back her freedom. She didn't know what to say. "Thank you," felt pathetically inadequate. Percy simply looked at her, his expression softening for the first time. "A king should never have to bow," he said quietly. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was a statement of fact. A declaration of his belief in her. And in that moment, it was more than enough. A silent understanding passed between them, a bond forged not in a contract of servitude, but in a shared victory and the promise of a shared future, as partners. As equals. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Whispers from the Dark. Victory was a strange, hollow ringing thing. Riser Phoenix was gone, the engagement was shattered, and Rias was free. The immediate aftermath in the occult research club room should have been triumphant. Kiba was smiling, a genuine, relieved expression that made him look younger. Kaneko was quietly eaten a chocolate bar from her seemingly endless supply, a clear sign of contentment. Akano had made a fresh pot of celebratory tea, her movements light and graceful. Yet, the air was still charged, humming with the residual energy of Percy's overwhelming power. They had won, but they had won because the quiet human in the corner had proven himself to be a force of nature, and none of them, least of all Rias, knew what that truly meant. Rias sat at her desk, staring at a blank wall, the annulment of her engagement replaying in her mind. It wasn't the future she had wanted, but it was the one she had been resigned to. Percy had handed her a future she hadn't dared to hope for, and the weight of that debt was immense. She looked over at him. He was standing by the window again, his default position, looking out over the moonlit campus. He hadn't celebrated, he hadn't accepted their praise. He had simply nodded when it was over, as if he had done nothing more strenuous than taking out the trash. That was a dangerous gamble, she said, her voice pulling everyone's attention. Challenging him like that, you didn't know the extent of his abilities. I knew enough, Percy replied, his gaze still fixed on the grounds outside. He was arrogant, overconfident, and completely reliant on a single ability. That's not a warrior, it's a parlor trick. He turned to face them, his expression serious, dispelling the last vestiges of celebration. And he was a distraction. A loud, obnoxious, but ultimately harmless one. Before anyone could respond to his dismissal of a high-class devil, the air in the room grew heavy and still. A complex, regal magic circle, the crimson of the House of Grimoire but infinitely more powerful and intricate, bloomed in the center of the room. It didn't burn with heat like risers. It radiated an aura of absolute, crushing authority that made the air feel thick as syrup. A single, calm voice echoed from the circle before a figure even appeared. Rias, I do hope I'm not interrupting anything. I saw the Phoenix sigil flare and then extinguish in your territory. I thought I should check in. A man stepped out of the light. He had the same striking crimson hair as Rias. But his eyes were a gentle blue. He wore a simple, modern suit, yet he carried himself with the effortless grace of an ancient king. This was Sirzek's Lucifer, Rias's older brother, and one of the four Mao who ruled the underworld. His smile was warm and disarming, but his power was a palpable ocean that made the entire building creak. Brother, Rias gasped, immediately standing and giving a slight bow. An act of respect Kiba and the others mirrored instantly. Sirzek's gentle eyes took in the scene, the scorched furniture, the tense atmosphere, and his sister's peerage. Then his gaze landed on Percy. It was not a probing or aggressive look. It was one of pure, unadulterated curiosity, like a master watchmaker encountering a timepiece of impossible design. It seems you've had a busy evening, Sirzek said, his smile never wavering. He looked at Percy. And you must be the ally I've been hearing whispers about. The one who operates outside the system. The message was clear. Percy's actions, from the stray in the gym to the duel with Riser, had not gone unnoticed at the highest levels. He was no longer a ghost. He was a person of interest. My name is Percy, he said, his posture not changing. He did not bow. He met the Satan's gaze as an equal, a fact that did not seem to offend Sirzek in the slightest, but rather, intrigued him more. A pleasure, Sirzek said smoothly. Riser is impetuous. Forgive me for not stepping in sooner, Rias. The political ties between our houses are delicate. But for him to be sent away so thoroughly, he looked back at Percy. His smile finally taking on a calculating edge. You have considerable power. Power that is not of the three factions. I'm sure you understand why that might be of interest to us. This was the real reason for his visit. It wasn't concern, it was intelligence gathering. A new, powerful player was on the board, and the king wanted to know its nature. Brother, Rias interjected, stepping forward. Percy is the sworn ally of the House of Grimoire. He has my complete trust. As he should, Sirzek nodded. He has earned it, clearly. But trust does not negate the need for understanding. We live in a precarious peace. Percy, unaccounted for power can be a spark in a tinderbox. Percy held the Devil King's gaze. Power is only a threat if it's used irresponsibly. My only concern is protecting this town. A noble goal, Sirzek conceded. I will not press you further. For now. He turned his attention back to his sister, his expression softening. I am glad you are safe, Rias. And that you are free. Just be aware that your actions, and those of your allies, now carry a much greater weight. The eyes of the underworld are on you. With a final, warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Seer's ex-Lucifer vanished, the oppressive weight of his presence lifting from the room. The silence he left behind was heavier than the one before. The political game had just escalated to the highest possible level. He's right, Percy said, breaking the quiet. Riser was a distraction, and now we have the attention of the Satans. We're wasting time. He walked over to a side table where he had placed the scorched journal recovered from Tamiel. He picked it up and tossed it onto Rias's desk. This is the real enemy. The Purity Cadre. We need to know what they're planning. The shift was immediate. Akano, Kiba, and Kaneko gathered around the desk as Rias opened the journal. The political victory felt distant and unimportant now, replaced by the cold reality of the coming war. The journal was filled with the rantings of a zealot, but beneath the rhetoric were chillingly precise details. It spoke of Erebus not as a god, but as a primordial truth, a state of pure, strong nothingness that predated the weakness of creation. The tainting was described as a baptism, a way to strip away the flaws of emotion and mixed heritage to create perfect soldiers. Then they found the section on Kuo. Listen to this, Rias read, her voice grim. The town is a confluence of ley lines, its spiritual foundation weakened by the death of the Christian god. The Shinto shrine was the first test, a successful poisoning of a holy site. But the true prize lies beneath the academy. The seal, the old ward placed by the factions eons ago, it decays. It is already a wound bleeding darkness into the world. It can be made into a font, a holy ground for our new world order. The academy itself shall be the conduit. A cold dread settled over the room. The attack on the shrine wasn't random. The ambush in the warehouse wasn't a simple hunt. They had been tests, preparations for a much larger plan. And their home, their school, was the target. As Rias read the final words on the page aloud, Phase 2, test the anomaly's defenses. Probe the Grimoire girl's new weapon. The entire building shuddered violently. A sound like a thunderclap, but with no accompanying flash of light, echoed from across the campus. It was a sound of pure, destructive impact. They rushed to the window. In the center of the main school courtyard, a massive crater was still smoking. Standing in the middle of it was a single figure. It was a devil. They could all feel the immense demonic power, but it was wreathed in the same tainted, nihilistic aura as the strays, only 100 times more potent. He wore the tattered remains of a uniform from a rival devil school, and in his hand, he held a demonic sword that seemed to drink the very moonlight from the air. This was no mindless beast. His intelligent, hate-filled eyes scanned the school building before locking directly onto the orc window, as if he could see them perfectly. He's from the house of Astaroth, Rias breathed, her eyes wide with shock. That's Diodora Astaroth's knight, a noble, someone of power and standing who had willingly embraced this corruption. The tainted knight raised his sword, and a wave of pure, negative energy shot out. Not at the orc building, but at the main schoolhouse. The wave of darkness struck the wall, and the concrete and glass didn't explode, it decayed, crumbling into black dust in an instant. This was a declaration of war. Kaneko, Kiba, with me. Rias commanded, her kingly authority returning in a rush. Akano, air support. Percy, do what you do best. There was no time for a teleportation circle. They burst out of the building, moving with a speed that would have been impossible for any human to track. They arrived in the ruined courtyard in seconds, forming a defensive line between the tainted knight and the school. You have chosen your side, traitor, Rias's voice boomed, amplified by her demonic power. The knight, whose name had probably been lost to his corruption, simply laughed. A sound like grinding stone. The Grimoire whelp, you consort with a filth-blooded half-breed and a human anomaly. It is you who are the traitor to our kind. His eyes, burning with black light, found Percy. The cadre sends its regards, anomaly. They wish to see what you are made of. He vanished, not with Kiba's pure speed, but by dissolving into a puddle of shadow on the ground. Only to reform directly behind Kaneko, his tainted sword swinging for her head. Kaneko reacted with pure instinct, ducking and driving a powerful punch into his gut. The blow, which could shatter stone, connected with a dull thud, but the knight barely flinched, the tainted aura around him acting as a form of kinetic armor. He brought his sword around again, but a silver blur intervened as Kiba appeared, parrying the blow with a shower of sparks. His strength is unnatural, Kiba grunted, being forced back a step. From the sky, a bolt of holy lightning descended, striking the knight dead on. He screamed, the holy power clearly agonizing him, but the tainting darkness clung to him, regenerating the damage with a sickening, black ooze almost as fast as it was inflicted. This was a different level of threat. He had the skill of a trained knight, the raw power of a high-class devil, and the insane regeneration and resilience of the tainted. Percy was already moving. He wasn't charging in. He was running a wide, circling path around the battlefield, his eyes scanning every detail. He saw the way the knight's shadow step worked, saw how the tainted aura flared to absorb impacts, saw how Akino's holy lightning was the most effective weapon against him. Kiba, don't engage him directly. Your speed is your advantage. Harass him. Keep him off balance. Percy's command cut through the chaos. Kaneko, you're the anvil. He has to plant his feet to use that shadow step. When he reappears, shatter the ground beneath him. Don't let him get set. The two of them exchange a glance and immediately changed their tactics. Kiba became a phantom, his sword striking from a dozen angles a second, forcing the knight to constantly defend. Kaneko began methodically destroying the courtyard, her punches turning the solid ground into a treacherous landscape of rubble and pits. The knight's shadow step became clumsy, his footing unstable. The knight snarled in frustration, his attention shifting to the one giving the orders. He dissolved into shadow again, this time reappearing directly in front of Percy. You die first. He lunged, his sword a streak of black lightning. Percy didn't summon a shield. He didn't dodge. He stood his ground. Just as the sword was about to pierce his heart, the water pipes buried deep beneath the courtyard ruptured. A dozen geysers of high-pressure water erupted from the ground, creating a chaotic, churning cage of water around the knight. His lunge was thrown off, his vision obscured. Percy used that split second. He slipped out the gaps in his own water trap and got inside the knight's guard. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't need one. He placed his open palm on the knight's chest, right over the pulsing, tainted core of his being. A jolt of icy, purifying energy flooded from Percy's hand into the knight. It wasn't an attack meant to destroy. It was an invasion. Percy was using his absolute control over water to forcibly seize control of the corrupted fluids within the knight's body. He wasn't trying to expand them like he did with the stray. He was trying to cleanse them. The knight screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony that was far worse than before. The tainted darkness within him fought back against the pure, primordial water being forced into its system. Black steam hissed from his skin. His body convulsed violently. It was a battle of wills, of two fundamental forces, being fought inside his very cells. The cadre sees you, anomaly. He gurgled, blood and black ooze dribbling from his mouth. The baptism is coming. Huo will be the font. Not tonight, Percy said through gritted teeth, the effort of this internal purification immense. He gave one final, concentrated push of his will. A brilliant, clean, blue light exploded from the knight's body. The tainted aura was violently expelled, dissolving into nothingness. The devil knight stood there for a moment, his eyes cleared of the black fire. A look of horrified understanding on his face as he realized what he had become. Then, his body, unable to handle the sudden, violent purification, crumbled to dust, his demonic sword clattering to the broken ground. Silence fell on the ruined courtyard. The geysers subsided. The orc members gathered, breathing heavily, staring at the spot where the noble-born devil had just ceased to exist. They had won, but the cost was visible all around them. A crater in the courtyard, a gaping hole in their school, and a chilling prophecy hanging in the air. They were no longer just investigating a mystery. They were on a hit list. The Purity cadre knew who Percy was, they knew his capabilities, and they had just declared that the war was coming to their doorstep. Huo Academy wasn't just a place of learning anymore. It was a battleground, and the enemy had just made it personal. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Sword and the Cross. The hole in the side of Kuo Academy was a gaping wound, a constant physical reminder of the escalating war they had been dragged into. For 3 days, a specialized team from the House of Grimoire, disguised as a construction crew, worked to repair the damage. Their magic weaving illusions of normalcy that fooled the student body but did nothing to soothe the tension coiling in the occult research club. The attack had changed something fundamental. The threat was no longer an abstract concept lurking in the shadows of the city. It had a face, a voice, and a personal vendetta against them. Percy stood by that very window, now replaced with magically reinforced glass, staring down at the courtyard where he had purified the tainted night. The memory of the battle was a cold knot in his stomach. The purification technique had been a desperate gamble, an intuitive leap that had nearly drained him. It was one thing to manipulate water in the environment, it was another to wage war on a cellular level inside a living being. The cost of that power was a deep, chilling exhaustion that settled into his bones. "Any luck with the journal?" he asked, not turning around. Rias, seated at her desk, sighed in frustration. "It's a Grimoire-level cipher. My brother's team is working on it, but it's slow. Tamiel's personal notes are a mess of ideological rhetoric and coded reports. We know the Purity Cadre is a radical faction within the Grigori, led by the Cadre class fallen angel Barakiel." At the mention of the name, Akino, who was tending to a small potted plant near the couch, flinched. It was a barely perceptible motion, but Percy saw it. Barakiel, her father, the man whose legacy she both revered and despised. He was the architect of the ideology that had nearly consumed her, the one who saw her very existence as an impurity. But we don't know their numbers, their primary base of operations, or the exact nature of their timeline, Rias finished, oblivious to her queen's silent turmoil. "We're fighting ghosts, not ghosts," Percy countered, his voice low. "Zealots. And zealots need relics. They need symbols." His gaze drifted from the courtyard to the front gates of the school. "They're not just going to rely on this tainted power. They'll want to secure weapons. Things of power that align with their ideology of purity." As if summoned by his words, the energy of the school grounds shifted. 2 new signatures appeared at the main gate. They were sharp, bright, and utterly foreign. They hummed with a power that was the antithesis of the demonic energy permeating the ORC. It was the clear, ringing chime of holy power. "The church," Kiba said, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of his sword. His friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by a cold, hard mask. His past as a survivor of the Holy Sword Project had left him with a deep and abiding hatred for the church and all its agents. Rias's expression hardened, unannounced and uninvited. "This is a breach of our treaty with the heavens." They watched from the window as 2 figures strode onto campus. One was a young woman with vibrant blue hair, her expression severe, carrying a massive sword wrapped in cloth on her back. The other was a girl with light brown hair tied in twintails, her demeanor bright and cheerful, a stark contrast to her companion. But both of them radiated the same potent, holy aura. They weren't just any agents. They were exorcists, and the power humming from the wrapped sword was unmistakable. "An Excalibur," Rias breathed, her eyes narrowing. "What are they doing here with a holy sword?" Before they could formulate a plan, the 2 newcomers stopped in the middle of the repaired courtyard. The blue-haired woman looked around, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and disgust. "This entire town reeks of devil filth, Xenovia." The cheerful one, Irina Shido, chirped. "But the reports were right. There's a lingering trace of fallen angel activity here, and something else. Something dark and hungry. Focus, Irina." The blue-haired one, Xenovia Quarta, admonished, her voice a stern baritone. "We are here for the stolen fragments of Excalibur. Intelligence tracked 3 of them to this town, into the hands of the fallen. We are to retrieve them, with or without the cooperation of the local devils." Her eyes scanned the school buildings before locking onto the orc with an unnerving precision. "And it seems the local devils have found us." In the club room, Kiba was trembling, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Excalibur," he hissed, the name a curse on his lips. "The sword that killed my friends." "Kiba, calm yourself," Rias ordered, though her own hand was glowing with destructive energy. But it was too late. With a cry of pure, unadulterated rage, Kiba vanished from the room in a blur of motion. intent on confronting the agents of the institution that had destroyed his life. Damn it, Rias cursed, preparing to follow. Wait, Percy said, holding up a hand. His expression was calm, calculating. Let him go. He'll be killed, Akino protested. He's letting his rage control him. Exactly, Percy said, his eyes fixed on the scene below. And so are they. This is what the cadre wants. Down in the courtyard, Kiba materialized in front of the two exorcists, his own demonic sword already in his hand. Agents of the church, he spat, his voice dripping with venom. You are not welcome here. Zenovia's eyes widened slightly as she saw him. Not in recognition of his face, but of the energy emanating from him. A devil who wields a holy sword. No, a sacred gear. Sword birth. You create swords of demonic power. An interesting, if blasphemous, ability. Where are the Excaliburs? Kiba demanded, ignoring her analysis. My business is with them, not you. The Excaliburs are the property of the church, Zenovia stated flatly. And our business is with the fallen who stole them. Unless you mean to interfere, devil, stand aside. Interfere. Kiba laughed, a cold, broken sound. That holy sword project, the one that used innocent children as lab rats until they died, all to find a wielder for those cursed blades, I am its sole survivor. I have more right to those swords than any of you. I will find them, and I will destroy them. His aura exploded, and he charged, his speed a silver streak across the courtyard. The battle was immediate and brutal. Irina moved to intercept, her own weapon, a shimmering rope of light, clashing with Kiba's sword. But Zenovia was the true threat. She unwrapped her weapon, and the power that burst forth was immense. It was the hilt and cross guard of a magnificent blade, but the blade itself was missing. This was Excalibur destruction. Even as a fragment, its holy power was overwhelming. Zenovia met Kiba's charge, and their blades clashed with a sound that was both the shriek of metal and the sizzle of holy and demonic energies colliding. Kiba was fast, his technique flawless, but Zenovia's raw power was on another level. The sheer force of the holy sword drove him back, the sacred energy scorching the air around him. It was exactly at that moment, as the three factions were poised on the brink of open conflict on school grounds, that the real enemy made its move. From the shadows of the school building, a dozen figures emerged. They were clad in the black combat gear of the Purity Cadre, their faces hidden by masks. They moved with a silent, coordinated deadliness. They didn't attack the devils or the exorcists. They made a beeline for the battle itself. Their leader, a tall fallen with 4 black wings, raised a hand. The relics are ours to claim, for the glory of the cadre. The impure shall not be allowed to possess them. Spears of pure, golden light, the signature weapon of the fallen angels, rained down on the combatants. It was a chaotic, 3-way melee. Kiba was forced to defend himself not just from Zenovia and Irina, but also from the cadre assassins. Zenovia and Irina, in turn, found themselves under assault from both a vengeful devil and a squad of fallen angel terrorists. It's a trap, Rias breathed from the window, her knuckles white. They're using Church's mission and Kiba's anger to create a chaotic battlefield, so they can swoop in and claim the swords. They're not just claiming them, Percy said, his eyes narrowed, his mind racing. They're escalating, forcing a direct conflict between the factions. If a Grimoire Knight kills an agent of the church, or vice versa, on this territory, the treaty shatters. It's brilliant, and we're all playing our parts perfectly. We have to stop this, Rias declared, ready to teleport down. No, Percy said, his voice firm. If you go down there, you're just another piece on their board. You'll be the Grimoire King choosing a side. We don't stop this by adding more force. He turned away from the window and began to walk towards the door. We stop it by taking all the other pieces off the board. Before Rias or Akino could ask what he meant, he was gone. Down in the courtyard, the battle had reached a fever pitch. Kiba, fighting with a desperate fury, had summoned dozens of demonic swords from the ground, creating a small army of blades to hold off the cadre. Zenovia was a powerhouse, her Excalibur destruction shattering light spears and demonic swords with every swing. But they were outnumbered and being attacked from all sides. The situation was untenable. The cadre leader saw his opening. As Zenovia was occupied parrying a blow from Kiba, he lunged for her, a long spear of dark light in his hand. Aimed not at her, but at the holy sword she wielded. The sword! Irina screamed in warning, but neither Kiba nor Xenovia could react in time. And then, Percy arrived. He didn't materialize in a flash of light or a blur of speed. He simply stepped out from behind a tree, as if he had been there all along. He moved with an unhurried, almost casual grace, walking directly into the heart of the maelstrom. The cadre leader's spear was inches from its target when a wall of water, dense and solid as concrete, erupted from the ground in front of it. The spear struck the wall and shattered, its light dissipating harmlessly. Every single combatant, devil, angel, and fallen, froze. They stared at the newcomer who had just effortlessly neutralized a cadre-level attack. Percy didn't look at any of them. He walked past the stunned cadre leader, past the wary Kiba, and stopped directly in front of Xenovia. He was unarmed, his hands loosely at his sides. "This has gone on long enough," he said. His voice calm and clear, yet it carried over the entire courtyard. "Who are you, human?" Xenovia demanded, pointing the hilt of Excalibur destruction at his chest. The holy power radiating from it was intense enough to make a normal human's skin crawl. Percy didn't even blink. "Your name is Xenovia Quarta," Percy stated. "You're a natural holy sword wielder. Pragmatic, devout, but willing to bend the rules to complete your mission. Your sword, Excalibur Destruction, focuses on pure, overwhelming power." He then turned his head slightly, his gaze falling on Irina. "Your name is Irina Shido. A reincarnated angel, formerly human. You wield Excalibur Mimic, capable of taking on the properties of other swords. You are cheerful, deeply faithful, and far more observant than you let on." The two exorcists stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. He knew who they were, the names of their swords, even their basic personality traits. "How?" Irina stammered. "Information is the most important weapon," Percy said simply. He then turned his gaze to the stunned cadre squad. "And you are fanatics. You believe that by collecting these swords and combining them with your tainted power, you can create a weapon that will purify the world. You are using this conflict, Kiba's personal tragedy, and the Church's rigid mission parameters to engineer a war that will serve your master's goals." He had laid the entire situation bare, dissecting the motivations of every single person on the field with surgical precision. The cadre leader recovered first. "Words are meaningless, anomaly. Kill him. Take the sword." His squad charged. At the same time, Xenovia, seeing Percy as an unknown variable and a potential threat, also swung her holy sword at him. A massive wave of destructive holy energy shot towards him, while a dozen spears of light closed in from the other side. He was trapped in a pincer attack of holy and unholy power. Percy stood his ground. He raised his hands, palms outward. "I said," he spoke, his voice dropping an octave, resonating with a power that seemed to shake the very foundations of the school. "This was over." He didn't create a wall. He created two. In front of him, a shield of churning, hyper-dense water formed, catching Xenovia's Excalibur wave. The holy energy sizzled and fought against it, but the sheer volume and pressure of the water contained and neutralized it. Behind him, another, identical shield erupted from the ground, catching the dozen light spears, extinguishing them like candles in a hurricane. He stood untouched between two opposing, world-shaking forces, holding them both at bay with a casual, almost contemptuous ease. The sight was so unbelievable it shattered the resolve of everyone on the field. The cadre assassins froze in their tracks. Xenovia lowered her sword, her mouth agape. Kiba stared, his rage forgotten, replaced by sheer awe. Percy let the water shields fall, the water splashing harmlessly onto the grass. He looked at the cadre leader. "Your plan has failed. Leave, now." The fallen angel hesitated, his fanaticism warring with the primal fear that Percy's display had ignited. "I won't ask again," Percy said, his voice turning to ice. A single, needle-thin tendril of water lifted from a puddle at his feet and hovered at his fingertip, vibrating with immense, contained power. The message was clear. He could kill them all before they could even blink. The cadre leader snarled, but the decision was made. "Fall back," he commanded, and he and his squad vanished into the shadows, their mission a total failure. Percy then turned his attention to the two exorcists. Your mission to retrieve the swords is compromised. The enemy knows you are here and what you are after. Continuing to operate alone is suicide. He looked over at Kiba, who was now standing with Rias and the others, who had finally come down to the courtyard. And your vendetta is putting this entire territory at risk. He looked from the stern, pragmatic face of Zenobia to the proud, defiant face of Rias. Your factions have a common enemy. An enemy who wants to see you destroy each other. The logical course of action is to cooperate. A temporary truce. A truce. With devils. Irina gasped, looking scandalized. I will not work with the church. Kiba growled. Zenobia, however, was silent. She was a pragmatist above all else. She had seen her mission nearly fail. She had seen the coordinated tactics of their new enemy. And she had seen this unknown human display a level of power and tactical acumen that defied all explanation. His logic, as cold and hard as it was undeniable. Your proposal has merit, Zenobia said slowly, her eyes locked on Percy. Our chances of success will be higher if we were not fighting on two fronts. Then we are in agreement, Percy said, as if the outcome had never been in doubt. In that moment, he was not a student, not a fighter, not even an ally. He was a power broker. He had stepped onto a battlefield of warring ideologies and ancient hatreds and had, through sheer force of will and undeniable strength, imposed his own logic upon it. He had forced a peace, however temporary, between the cross and the sword, all to face the greater darkness that was coming for them all. As he stood there, the undisputed center of gravity in a world of supernatural titans, he saw the small, quiet form of Asia Argento, who had come out with Rias, looking at him. Her expression was not one of fear or awe, but of profound, hopeful relief. It was a look that reminded him of the innocence he had once fought to protect, and it solidified his resolve. This truce, this fragile peace, he would protect it, no matter the cost. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Kokobeel's Folly. The truce was a fragile, ugly thing, born of necessity and held together by the sheer, undeniable force of Percy's logic. The Occult Research Club room had become a neutral ground. A tense demilitarized zone where ancient enemies sat across from each other, sipping Akino's tea with the stiff, awkward silence of a forced family gathering. Zenobia Quarta, her massive Excalibur D. Estruction leaning against the couch beside her, was a pillar of stern, watchful silence. Irina Shido, on the other hand, tried to bridge the gap with a bright, nervous energy that only seemed to make the tension worse. Kiba was the most volatile element. He sat in the farthest corner of the room, radiating a cold fury, his gaze fixed on the holy sword as if he could melt it with sheer hatred. Percy's intervention had stopped the battle, but it hadn't healed the wounds. Rias, to her credit, was the perfect diplomat, her questions about the church's intelligence on the fallen angels calm and professional, steering the conversation away from the landmines of past grievances. Our intel suggested a small, rogue faction of Fallen had stolen the Excalibur fragments, Zenobia explained, her voice clipped and formal. We were not aware of their numbers, or their tainted afflictions. They are the Purity Cadre, Rias supplied, pushing Tamiel's journal across the table. A splinter group from the Grigori. We believe their leader is a Cadre-class Fallen named Barakiel. The name landed like a stone in the quiet room. Akino, who was refilling Irina's teacup, froze, the porcelain teapot trembling in her hand. Zenovia's eyes flicked to her, a flicker of recognition in her gaze. Barakiel, the vice-governor of the Grigori. He is Akino Himehima's father, is he not? The question, though not meant to be cruel, was a blade to Akino's heart. He is, she said, her voice strained, her smile faltering for a moment before she forced it back into place. Though we are not close. Percy watched the exchange, a silent observer. He saw the pain in Akino's eyes, the way she retreated behind her mask. He saw the conflict in Barakiel's actions. A leader of a purity-obsessed faction, whose own daughter was the epitome of what they claimed to despise. It was a contradiction, a piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. It doesn't make sense, Percy said, speaking for the first time in an hour. His voice drew every eye in the room. A leader of his standing, starting a terrorist cell. It's too overt, too clumsy. What are you suggesting? Rias asked. I'm suggesting Barakiel might be the figurehead. The ideological inspiration, Percy said, his gaze distant, his mind working through the strategic possibilities. But he's not the field commander. A man like that, a vice governor, he works through proxies. He wouldn't be here in Kuo, getting his hands dirty. Then who is leading the forces here? Zenobia challenged. Before Percy could answer, a wave of immense, suffocating power descended upon the entire school. It was far greater than Tamiel's, far more oppressive than the Tainted Knights. This was the power of a true master, a being of immense age and strength. The windows of the ORC building rattled, and the teacups on the table vibrated. Simultaneously, a massive, dome-like barrier of purple energy flickered into existence, enveloping the entire Kuo Academy campus. They were trapped. What is this? Irina gasped, her cheerful demeanor finally shattering. Rias was already at the window, her face pale. This energy, this level of power, there's only one person it can be. In the center of the courtyard, a figure had appeared. He had 10 magnificent black wings spreading from his back, a clear sign of his immense power. He wore ornate, black and silver armor, and his face was handsome. Framed by long black hair, but his eyes burned with a mixture of boredom, madness, and an ancient, nihilistic glee. This was no mere field operative. This was Kokobile, one of the leaders of the Grigori, a veteran of the Great War, and a being whose power was said to rival that of the Satans. Greetings, little devils, Kokobile's voice boomed across the campus, amplified by his power so that every single person trapped within the barrier could hear him. And welcome, little lambs from the church. I do hope you enjoy the show. I've gone to so much trouble to arrange it. He was not alone. Behind him, dozens of Purity Cadre soldiers materialized, their ranks bolstered by several hulking, four-armed behemoths that looked like a grotesque fusion of golems and stray devils. And hovering at his side was a man they all recognized with a jolt of horror. Fried Selzen, the maniacal stray exorcist, his eyes gleaming with psychotic delight, holding a familiar, fragmented holy sword. Excalibur rapidly, and another cadre member held the fourth fragment, Excalibur Transparency. They had found the swords. Kokobile, Zenobia breathed, her face ashen. He's the one who stole the swords. This was never about a small, rogue faction, Percy said, his voice grim, his theory confirmed in the worst possible way. This was orchestrated from the top. Kokobile's mad gaze swept the campus before settling on the Orc building. I know you're in there, daughter of Grimoire. And you, daughter of Barakil. How fitting that his own child should witness the glorious beginning of his new world order. He was always too sentimental for the grand vision. He wanted to purify the factions. I, however, want to restart the Great War and burn this stagnant world to the ground. His insane laughter echoed through the barrier. It was all a lie. The Purity Cadre, Barakil's ideology, it was all a front, a tool used by Kokobile to gather the pieces he needed for his own, far more insane plan. He's gathered us all here, Rias realized, her mind racing. Devils, fallen, the church's agents, the Excaliburs, he wants to create an incident so catastrophic that the factions will have no choice but to go to war. It's worse than that, Percy said, his eyes narrowed on the ground beneath Kokobile's feet. He could feel it now, a deep, sickening vibration coming from under the earth. The weak, decaying seal that the journal had mentioned. He's not just creating a political incident. He's creating a weapon. Kokobile confirmed his fears a moment later. These holy swords you cherish so much, he sneered, gesturing to the four fragments now being brought together by Fried. Their sacred power is the perfect key. When combined, the resonant NCY of their holy energy will be enough to overload the decaying seal beneath this pathetic school. It will shatter, and the raw, beautiful power of Erebus will bleed forth, turning this entire town into a glorious font of tainted power. A beachhead for a new, stronger army. A full-scale battle erupted on the grounds. Sona Shitori and her entire student council, revealing their own devil peerages, emerged from the student council building to engage the cadre forces, their water-based magic a surprisingly effective counter to the Fallen's light. Kiba, his personal vendetta now dwarfed by the apocalyptic threat, led the charge from the Orc, his face a grim mask of determination. Rias, Akano, Kaneko, with me. Percy's voice cut through the room, taking command with an unquestioned authority. He looked at the two exorcists. Zenobia, Irina, Your mission is the swords. Forget Kokobeel. Forget his army. Get those Excalibur fragments back. That is the only objective that matters. Zenobia, for the first time, looked not to the church for orders, but to this human who spoke with the clarity of a veteran commander. She gave a sharp, determined nod. Understood. They burst from the building. A united force against a common doom. The courtyard was a kaleidoscope of chaos. Demonic energy clashed with holy light. Water magic warred with tainted power. Rias and her Pirano entered the fray, a crimson comet of destruction, immediately turning the tide in a section of the battlefield. Zenobia and Irina, working with a newfound, desperate synergy, carved a path directly towards freed Selzen and the assembled swords. Percy, however, did not join the main battle. He moved along the edges, a phantom in the chaos. His target was not the army. His target was the general. Kokobeel W. watched the battle below with the bored amusement of a god watching insects fight. He easily deflected a combined assault from Sona and Rias, his 10 wings shielding him from their magic like an impenetrable fortress. Is this all the great houses of Grimoire and Citri can muster? He mocked. How utterly disappointing. It was then that he sensed it. A subtle shift in the air. The humidity was rising, the temperature dropping. He looked around, his senses on high alert. He saw nothing, but he could feel something. A presence. Watching him. Percy was using the chaos as cover. He was pulling water from everywhere. The school's underground sprinkler system, the massive water tower on a nearby hill, the very clouds in the sky, drawing it all into a single, massive, invisible reservoir held in the air by his will. He achieved a state of focus he hadn't touched in years, a perfect union of his demigod instincts and the shinobi techniques he now knew. He could feel the vibrations of the bee. Battle through the moisture in the air and on the ground, a form of sensory perception that was almost omniscient. He could see every attack, every defense, every feint on the entire battlefield. It was a state akin to sage mode. A perfect harmony with the natural world. Kokobeel was growing uneasy. The feeling of being watched intensified. He unleashed a massive volley of light spears at the main school building, hoping to draw his hidden enemy out. Show yourself, coward. The moment the light spears left his hands, Percy acted. He didn't attack Kokobeel. He attacked his wings. A dozen whips of hyper-compressed water, moving faster than sound, shot out from the shadows. They weren't meant to cut. They were meant to disrupt. The whips struck the delicate, energy-sensitive feathers of Kokobeel's 10 wings, not with force, but with a precise, elemental jolt that short-circuited the flow of light energy. Kokobeel cried out in shock and pain as his wings faltered, his flight becoming unstable. The attack had come from a dozen directions at once. It was impossible. He finally located the source of the attack. Percy was standing on the roof of the gymnasium, his hands glowing with a soft, blue light. The anomaly. Kokobeel hissed, his boredom finally replaced by a burning, furious interest. So, you are the Grimoire's new toy. Let's see if you break as easily as the others. He abandoned the battle below and shot towards Percy, a black comet of rage and light. He unleashed a storm of light spears, enough to level a city block. Percy didn't move. He simply raised a hand. The massive, invisible reservoir of water he had been gathering finally materialized. It was not a wave or a sphere. It was a dragon. A colossal, serpentine dragon made of pure, churning water, its eyes glowing with blue light. It rose into the air, dwarfing the school, its roar the sound of 1,000 waterfalls. The water dragon met Kokobeel's storm of light. It didn't block the spears, it swallowed them. The holy light sizzled and steamed against its body, but the sheer volume of water was too much. The dragon coiled and twisted, a living embodiment of the ocean's fury, and slammed into Kokobeel. The impact sent the fallen angel careening out of the sky, crashing into the center of the courtyard with the force of a meteor. He was wounded, his armor cracked, his pride shattered. He pushed himself out of the crater, his eyes blazing with disbelief. What is this power? He stammered. Percy landed softly in front of him. You wanted a war, Kokobeel, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. The water dragon coiled in the sky above him, a silent, waiting god of destruction. You just brought one to the wrong place. He didn't wait for a reply. He had analyzed Kokobeel's power, his arrogance, his fighting style. He knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to outpower a being who had survived the Great War. He was going to drown him. He brought his hands together, then thrust them forward. The water dragon in the sky roared and then descended. It wasn't a wild attack. It was a controlled, contained, focused deluge. It was a tsunami in a bottle. All the water he had gathered, from the pipes, the tower, the clouds, crashed down into the center of the courtyard, contained within the magical barrier Kokobile himself had created. The Kadri soldiers were washed away. The behemoths were crushed. Kokobile screamed as the crushing, relentless force of a contained ocean slammed into him, extinguishing his light, smothering his power, and grinding him against the very ground he had sought to desecrate. The roar of the water was deafening for a long, terrible moment. Then, as quickly as it had come, Percy dispersed it. The water vanished, turning into a fine, clean mist that settled over the silent, battered courtyard. In the center of it all, Kokobile lay in a crater, his 10 wings broken and tattered, his armor shattered, his body broken. He was unconscious, but alive. Defeated. On the other side of the field, Zenobia stood with the 4 Excalibur fragments in her hands, freed Selzen having been dispatched by a combined, furious assault from her and Kiba. The battle was over. The war, for now, was won. Percy stood over Kokobile's unconscious form, the mist swirling around him. He had faced down one of the most powerful beings in the world and had won not through brute force, but through strategy, patience, and the absolute, overwhelming power of his element. He had saved them all, and in doing so, he had just painted a target on his back big enough for all the gods and monsters in this new world to see. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Price of Power. The aftermath of Kokobile's defeat was a silence more profound than the roar of the contained tsunami that had ended the battle. The barrier fell. The surviving Purity Kadri soldiers, their leader broken and their god weapon silent, fled into the night. What was left was a scene of utter devastation under the cold, indifferent light of the moon. The courtyard was a cratered, waterlogged ruin. The school buildings were scarred. Sona Shitori's peerage was tending to the wounded, their faces grim. Rias and her family stood together, battered and exhausted, but whole. And in the center of it all, Percy stood over the unconscious form of Kokobile, the fine mist from his final attack still clinging to his clothes. The adrenaline of the battle was fading, leaving behind the bone-deep weariness and the chilling realization of what he had just done. He hadn't just defeated an enemy, he had single-handedly neutralized a Kadri class leader of a major faction. He had shattered the delicate balance of power that had held their world together for centuries. The sound of slow, deliberate clapping broke the silence. Percy looked up. A new figure had appeared at the edge of the crater, having arrived so silently that no one had sensed him. He was a handsome man with black hair and golden bangs, dressed in a stylish, open-collared shirt and trench coat. He radiated an aura of immense, ancient power, but it was different from Sirzex's regal authority or Kokobile's mad fury. It was a relaxed, curious, and infinitely dangerous power, like a patient predator observing a new and interesting species. "Well, now," the man said, a wide, appreciative grin on his face. "That was one hell of a show. It's been a long time since I've seen Kokobile get his wings clipped so thoroughly. I do believe I owe you a drink." Azazel, Rias breathed, her eyes wide. This was the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels, the leader of the Grigori. Azazel ignored her, his entire focus on Percy. He hopped down into the crater, his shoes crunching on the broken ground, and walked over to Kokobile's unconscious form, nudging him with his foot. "Always so dramatic, this one. Restart the Great War, he says. Doesn't he know how much paperwork that would create?" He sighed, a theatrical, long-suffering sound, before looking back at Percy, his grin returning. "You, on the other hand, you're new. The aqueous anomaly, as my panicked scouts have been calling you. You fight with the tactical percy, ion of a Grigori general but wield the raw power of a primordial. It's a fascinating contradiction." Percy remained silent, his guard still up. He could sense no immediate malice from Azazel, but the fallen angel's casual demeanor was more unnerving than open hostility. This was a being who saw a world-ending catastrophe as a mild inconvenience. "Don't look so tense," Azazel said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to clean up my mess." He waved a hand, and Kokobeel's body was encased in a block of golden light before vanishing. He'll be dealt with. As for the purity cadre, he grimaced. As if the name left a bad taste in his mouth. I'm afraid the problem is deeper than one madman's ambition. Barakiel's ideology has taken root in a significant portion of my people. This fanaticism, it's a poison. Kokobeel just weaponized it. His gaze became serious, losing its earlier flippancy. He was also right about one thing. The seal on Erebus is failing. His ritual, had it been completed, would have been catastrophic. Your theory was correct, he said, looking directly at Percy with a new level of respect. This tainting isn't a weapon they found. It's a plague they're intentionally spreading. And Kokobeel's little stunt has dangerously accelerated the decay of the seal. Before the conversation could continue, 2 more flashes of light announced the arrival of the other faction leaders. Sears's Lucifer appeared in his crimson grimoire circle, his expression foregoing its usual warmth for one of grave concern. And from a pillar of brilliant, holy light, the Archangel Michael descended, his 4 golden wings radiating a gentle, calming aura, though his handsome face was etched with worry. The 3 most powerful beings in the world now stood in the ruins of Kuo Academy. Their attention, like Azazel's, was immediately drawn to Percy. Sears's had known of his existence, but Michael was seeing him for the first time, and the Archangel's eyes widened in surprise. This energy, Michael murmured, his voice like the chime of 1,000 tiny bells. It is not of heaven, nor the underworld. It is, of the world itself. Primal, untouched. The Lida's summit convened right there, in the cratered heart of the battlefield. The weight of their combined presence was staggering. Rias and her peerage, Sona and hers, even Zenobia and Irina, stood back. Reduced to the role of spectators as the titans of their world discussed the fate of it. Percy, however, remained where he was, an unwilling participant in the center of their circle. He listened as they talked, his face an unreadable mask. They spoke of political fallout, of troop movements, of reinforcing the seal, of purging the remaining cadre members. They spoke of the world as a grand, cosmic chessboard. And he was the new, unpredictable piece that had just knocked their kings off their squares. The boy's power is a concern, Michael said, his tone gentle but firm. It is a wild, untamed force. For the sake of balance, it must be brought into the fold. I agree, Sears said, his eyes on Percy. Percy, what you have done here tonight has averted a war. The underworld owes you a great debt. We would see that debt repaid. I can offer you a title, a place of honor among the 72 pillars. You could be a high-class devil, with your own peerage, your own territory. Azazel snorted. Don't listen to the stiff in the suit. Titles are boring. Come to the Grigori. We have the best research and development. We could study your power, help you understand it. And our parties are infinitely better. Even Michael made an offer. Should you choose the path of light, heaven would welcome you. Your power could be a great force for purification, for healing. We old grant you a place among the seraphim, a sacred duty to protect mankind. The offers were staggering. Nobility, knowledge, holiness. They were offering him a place at their table, a chance to be one of the gods he had spent a lifetime fighting against. It was everything a person in this world could ever dream of. Percy listened to it all, his expression unchanging. When they were finished, a heavy silence fell. 3 of the most powerful beings in existence waited for his answer. He looked at each of them in turn. The king, the scientist, the saint. Then he looked past them, to where Rias and her friends stood, watching him. Their faces a mixture of awe, hope, and fear. He saw Akino's quiet strength, Kiba's newfound resolve, Kaniko's unwavering loyalty. He saw Rias, her expression conveying a single, silent plea. Don't leave us. His decision wasn't even a choice. It was a simple, undeniable fact. I appreciate your offers, he said, his voice quiet but firm, carrying across the ruined courtyard. But I'm not interested. The 3 leaders stared, stunned into silence. I don't want a title, he said, his gaze on Sears's. I don't want to be a lab experiment, he added, looking at Azazel. And I have no interest in your sacred duties, he finished, his eyes meeting Michael's. I told you before, my only concern is protecting this town. My place is here, he gestured, with his head towards Rias and her peerage. With them, his rejection was absolute. It was not born of arrogance, but of a profound, weary clarity. He was not a piece to be claimed or a weapon to be wielded. He was a guardian, and he had already chosen who and what he would guard. Azazel was the first to react, a slow grin spreading across his face. Well, I'll be damned. The kid's got principles. Sirzex looked disappointed but understanding. Michael simply looked sad, as if lamenting a great loss for his side. The summit concluded with a new, grudging respect for the anomaly in their midst. They agreed to work together to reinforce the seal and hunt the Kadri. But as they departed, leaving behind teams to repair the damage and erase the memories of the few humans who might have witnessed the battle, a new, unspoken truth settled over the world. The old power structure was broken. There was a fourth player on the board now, one who answered to no one but his own convictions. Later that night, long after the leaders had gone and a semblance of normalcy had been magically restored to the campus, Percy stood on the roof of the ORC building. The physical exhaustion of the battle had set in, but his mind was still racing. The feeling of Kokobeel's tainted life force fighting against his own power, the sheer wrongness of it, lingered in his mind. The door to the roof opened softly, and Rias stepped out. A light shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the night chill. She walked over to stand beside him, her presence a quiet comfort in the silence. For a long time, they just stood there, watching the lights of their town twinkle below. "You could have had anything," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "A title, power, a place among the gods of this world. They're just bigger cages," Percy replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Why?" she asked, her voice filled with a genuine, desperate need to understand him. "Why choose this? Why choose us, after everything you can clearly do?" Percy was silent for a long moment. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had commanded an ocean, that had held the life of a fallen god in their palm. He thought of his old life, of the friends he had fought and bled with, the family he had lost. He thought of the crushing loneliness that had been his constant companion since waking up in this new world. "In my old life," he said, his voice rough with an emotion he rarely showed, "I had a family. People I fought for, and in the end, I failed them. I lost them." He finally turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, she saw the raw, ancient grief in his sea-green eyes. It was a depth of pain she couldn't possibly comprehend, but she could feel its truth. "My power," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It isn't a gift, it's a responsibility, a promise to myself that I won't fail again. I'm not here because of a debt, Rias. I'm here because when I'm fighting with you, with Kiba, Akano, Kaneko, for the first time in this new life, I feel like I have something to protect again. I have a family again." It was a confession, a moment of raw, unshielded vulnerability from the most powerful and self-contained person she had ever met. It laid his soul bare, and in doing so, it irrevocably bound hers to him. She understood, then, their alliance, their partnership, it was not one of strategy or convenience. It was something far deeper. It was the bond between two lonely leaders, two people who carried the weight of the worlds on their shoulders, who had finally found a true equal and confidant in one another. She didn't reach for his hand. She didn't offer a grand declaration. She simply stood beside him, a silent, unwavering presence against the vastness of the night sky, and shared the weight of his burden. The battle for Kuo was over, but the war for their world, and their place in it, was just beginning. And they would face it together. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. Heart of the Abyss. The victory against Kokobeel had come at a steep price, and the bill was now due. In the week that followed, Azazel's intelligence reports painted a grim picture. The fallen angel leader, true to his word, had shared his findings with the other factions in the interest of self-preservation. Kokobeel's ritual, though interrupted, had acted like a hammer blow to the already cracked seal beneath Kuo Academy. The decay was accelerating, and the tainted energy, once a slow leak, was now a steady, corrosive bleed. Strange phenomena were being reported all over town, shadows moving on their own. Whispers in empty rooms, a creeping sense of paranoia and despair settling over the populace. Erebus was stirring. The decision was made at a grim, clandestine meeting between the faction lieutenants. A full-scale ritual to permanently repair the seal would take months to prepare. They didn't have months. They needed a temporary fix, a patch to stop the bleeding. Azazel, drawing on the Grigori's vast knowledge of ancient seals and forbidden magic, pinpointed the problem. The seal wasn't just a magical construct, it was anchored by a celestial being, a guardian angel, who had volunteered for the duty eons ago. The constant, relentless pressure from Erebus's aura had corrupted the guardian. It was no longer reinforcing the seal, its corrupted will was actively working to unravel it. The mission was simple, and suicidal. A small, elite team had to descend into the sub-dimensional space where the seal was anchored, fight their way to its heart, and place a temporary, purifying ward. It was a plunge into the very heart of the abyss. The team was chosen not by rank, but by a unique confluence of abilities. Rias, whose power of destruction could erase the taint, physical manifestations they were likely to encounter. Akano, whose holy lightning was one of the few things truly effective against the tainting itself. Kiba, whose speed was necessary for navigating the treacherous, shifting landscape of the abyss. And Xenovia, whose Excalibur destruction was a potent weapon of raw, purifying holy power, making her a crucial asset despite her outsider status. And Percy, who was the undisputed linchpin of the entire operation. His elemental purity was their greatest weapon, and his tactical mind, their best hope of survival. They stood in the now repaired orc room, the air thick with the gravity of their task. Asia Argento, her hands clasped in prayer, looked at them with wide, tear-filled eyes. Please be careful," she whispered. Sai walked over to her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Her innate, radiant kindness was a beacon of light in a world that was growing darker by the day, and a fierce, protective instinct rose in him. "We will be," he said, his voice softer than the others had ever heard it. "You just hold the line for us up here." Azazel, acting as mission coordinator, made the final preparations. The entrance to the seal's sub-dimension is directly beneath the school, where Kokobil tried to start his ritual, he explained, his voice devoid of its usual humor. "Once you're inside, you'll be cut off. Time and space will be unstable. Your own fears, your own regrets, the abyss will use them against you. It will try to break you down from the inside. Trust nothing but the person standing next to you." He looked directly at Percy. "Get them through this, kid. Your power is the only thing that can truly push back the darkness in there." With a final, grim nod, Rias created a teleportation circle, this one darker, more complex. It wasn't designed for travel, but for a descent. One by one, they stepped into it, a small band of devils, a holy swordswoman, and a primordial force in human form. Plunging headfirst into a realm of pure, existential dread. The transition was not a clean flash of light. It was a sickening, tearing sensation, like being pulled through a membrane of reality. They landed on a floor of smooth, black, obsidian-like stone in a realm of perpetual twilight. There was no sky, only an oppressive, starless ceiling of roiling black and purple clouds. Jagged, crystalline structures grew from the ground like twisted trees, pulsing with a faint, malevolent light. The air was cold, thin, and carried a constant, low-level whisper that seemed to slide directly into the back of their minds, murmuring their deepest insecurities. "You're a failure, Rias. Your peerage will die because of your weakness. They hate you, Akano. Impure, filth. Your friends are dead, Yuto. You couldn't save them. You were a tool, Xenovia. Nothing more than the sword you carry. It's already started." Percy's voice cut through the whispers, a solid anchor in the swirling psychological chaos. "Don't listen to it. It's a weapon, nothing more. Focus on my voice. Move forward." They advanced through the twisted, crystalline forest, the whispers growing louder, more personal. The path ahead seemed to shift and writhe, the black stone under their feet occasionally rippling like dark water. The first apparition manifested in front of Kiba. It was a group of children, their faces pale and gaunt, their eyes hollow. They wore the tattered rags he remembered from the Holy Sword Project. "Why did you leave us, Yuto?" one of them whispered, its voice a dry, rattling sound. "Why were you the only one to survive?" Kiba froze, his sword clattering from his trembling hand. His breath hitched, his carefully constructed composure shattering. The apparitions took a step forward, their hands outstretched. Before they could touch him, a wall of water slammed into them, dissolving them into black smoke. Percy stood in front of Kiba, shielding him. "They're not real, Kiba," he said, his voice firm. "They're echoes, shadows. They have no power but what you give them." He looked back at the stunned knight. "Your past does not define your present. Your friends would be proud of the man you are now. Honor them by fighting." Quote. Kiba stared at him, then at his own trembling hands. He took a deep breath, the phantom whispers receding in the face of Percy's unwavering conviction. He picked up his sword, his grip firm once more. "Thank you," he whispered. They pressed on, deeper into the abyss. The next attack was aimed at Xenovia. The world around them shimmered and transformed into a grand, sunlit cathedral. A figure stood at the altar, cloaked in divine light. It was an image of the Christian God, radiant and powerful. "You have consorted with devils, my child," the apparition's voice boomed, filled with a terrible, sorrowful judgment. "You have forsaken your faith, your sacred duty. You are cast out. You have no place in heaven." Xenovia stumbled back, her faith the very bedrock of her existence. The thought of being abandoned by her God was a blow more devastating than any physical attack. Her hand went to her cross, her knuckles white. This time, it was Rias who stepped forward. "Do not listen to this lie," she commanded, her crimson aura flaring in defiance of the phantom holy light. "Your God is dead, Xenovia. That is a fact of this world. But your faith is your own. It is a strength that comes from within you, not from an absentee deity. Your devotion is what gives your sword its power. This thing is just a shadow, twisting your greatest strength into a weapon against you." Xenovia looked from the sorrowful god figure to the defiant devil king, and she saw the truth in Rias's words. Her faith was not a contract to be revoked. It was her own will. She raised Excalibur destruction, its holy power flaring to life, and the cathedral illusion shattered around them. The abyss was growing more desperate. It threw phantoms of Barakiel at Akino, taunting her with accusations of impurity. It showed Rias visions of her peerage, dead at her feet, victims of her failed leadership. Each time, they held together, their bonds forged in the iris of real battle proving stronger than the shadowy fears of this realm. They had become a true team, each member shielding the others from the psychological attacks that targeted their specific weaknesses. Finally, they reached the heart of the sub-dimension. It was a vast, circular cavern. In the center, suspended in the air by crackling chains of black and purple energy, was the seal. It was a massive, multifaceted crystal, once brilliant white, now almost completely consumed by a creeping, black corruption. And chained to its surface, like a fly in a spider's web, was the guardian. It might have once been an angel of magnificent beauty. Now, it was a twisted, horrific mockery. Its wings were tattered and skeletal, its face a mask of eternal, silent screaming. Its eyes were hollow pits from which the tainted energy of the void bled like black tears. It was no longer a guardian, it was a living conduit for Erebus's will. As they entered, the guardian's head snapped up, its hollow gaze fixing on them. The whispers in their minds ceased, replaced by a single, overwhelming voice that was not a sound, but a direct, crushing impression on their souls. "You should not have come. There is nothing here but the end. The sweet, silent truth of nothingness." The corrupted guardian raised a hand, and the very ground of the cavern writhed, forming into a legion of shadowy creatures, each one a twisted parody of an angel. The final battle began. Rias and Akino provided air support, their powers a rain of destruction and holy lightning that tore through the Shadow Legion. Kiba and Xenovia were a whirlwind of steel and holy light on the ground, cutting down any creature that got too close. But for every one they destroyed, two more rose from the abyssal floor. They were fighting a tide of pure despair. Percy knew they couldn't win a battle of attrition. Their target was the Guardian. He was the only one who could get close. He began to run, weaving through the chaotic battle, his destination the center of the cavern. As he ran, the Guardian focused its full psychic power on him. The world around Percy dissolved, replaced by a vision so real, so perfect, it stole the breath from his lungs. He was standing on the beach at Camp Half-Blood. The sun was warm, the sky was a brilliant blue. Annabeth was there, her gray eyes sparkling, her blonde hair catching the sea breeze. Grover was playing his pipes, a cheerful, chaotic tune. His mother was setting up a picnic blanket with blue cookies. They were all there. They were all alive. You can stay, a voice whispered. It was the guardian's, but it was cloaked in the warm, familiar tones of his mother. You can have it all back, Perseus. Your world, your life. No more fighting, no more loss, just peace, just home. All you have to do is stop. Lay down your burden. Stay with us. The temptation was a physical thing, a crushing weight of longing and grief that threatened to bring him to his knees. A world without death, a world without loss, a world where he hadn't failed. It was everything he had ever wanted. He looked at Annabeth's smiling face, the illusion so perfect he could almost smell her lemon soap shampoo. He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling, and then, behind the illusion, he heard a cry of pain. Rias, one of the shadow creatures, had gotten through their defenses. He heard the clash of Kiba's sword, the roar of Akino's lightning. He heard his new family, his new friends, fighting and bleeding for him, for this world, in the cold, dark reality he had left behind. His choice was made in a heartbeat. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, the sea green of his irises was burning with a light that was not of this world. It was the light of a primordial dawn, the life-giving essence of a world's first ocean. My home is with them now, he whispered. He clenched his fist, and the perfect, beautiful illusion of his past shattered like glass, revealing the dark, nightmarish reality of the cavern. He stood before the corrupted guardian, his heart aching with a fresh, raw grief, but his will was forged into something harder than diamond. He had made his choice. He had, consciously and completely chosen this life over his old one. In that moment of absolute, unwavering conviction, something inside him unlocked. A new facet of his power, one he never knew he possessed. He had always used water as a weapon, a force of destruction and control. But water was also the source of all life. He raised his hands, and a torrent of power erupted from him. But it was not a weapon. It was pure, brilliant, liquid light. It was water imbued with the sacred, life-giving essence of his primordial soul. It was a flood of creation in a realm of nothingness. The torrent of life water washed over the guardian. It didn't scream. The tainted energy that had infested it for millennia was not burned or destroyed, it was simply washed away. Cleansed. The black corruption receded from the seal's crystal, the twisted, screaming face of the guardian softened, and its skeletal wings began to shimmer with a faint, ethereal light. The legion of shadow creatures dissolved into mist. The oppressive, whispering dread vanished from the cavern, replaced by a quiet, holy hum. Percy pushed forward, his life-giving power flowing from him in a relentless, purifying tide. He reached the seal and placed his hand on the guardian's chest. He poured every ounce of his will, his conviction, his loyalty to his new family, into that one, final act of purification. A brilliant, white light exploded from the seal, a light so pure it forced the others to shield their eyes. When it faded, the cavern was transformed. The black stone was now a pale, shimmering white. The twisted crystals were gone. The seal in the center pulsed with a strong, steady, healthy light. The guardian angel, now freed from its torment, its form restored to its former glory, gave Percy a single, grateful nod. Before fading back into the heart of the seal, its duty resumed. They had done it. The seal was stable. The bleeding had stopped. Percy fell to one knee, the exertion of unleashing such a raw, creative force leaving him drained in a way no physical battle ever had. Rias and the others rushed to his side, their faces a mixture of utter astonishment and profound gratitude. They had just witnessed him turn back the tide of a cosmic horror, not with violence, but with an act of pure, unconditional life. They had seen his ultimate declaration of loyalty, his choice to fully embrace their world, their lives, as his own. The bonds between them, forged in combat and tempered in fear, were now solidified into something unbreakable, something absolute. As Kiba and Rias helped him to his feet, he knew, with a certainty that resonated in the core of his soul, that he was finally, truly, home. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Coming Dawn. The return journey from the abyss was the opposite of their descent. It was not a tearing, but a gentle lift, a feeling of ascent from a deep, crushing pressure into the light. They materialized back in the Occult Research Club room in a soft glow of grimoire crimson. The familiar scent of old books and Akino's tea, a comforting balm after the sterile, psychological horror of the seal's subdimension. They were battered, not in body, but in spirit. The psychic wounds from the abyss were still fresh, the echoes of their deepest fears still whispering at the edges of their hearing. Yet, they were unbroken. More than that, they were united in a way they had never been before. They had walked through the valley of their own personal hells and had pulled each other through. Asia rushed forward, her face a mess of relieved tears, handing out magically warm towels and cups of sweet, calming tea. Her simple, unadulterated goodness was the perfect antidote to the lingering chill of the void. Kiba, for the first time, accepted a cup from her with a small, genuine smile. The shadows of his past seeming a little less dark. Zenobia, ever the pragmatist, was already cleaning Excalibur destruction, but her movements were less rigid, her eyes Ocasio Nally flicking to the others with a newfound, grudging respect. The barrier between devil and exorcist had been irrevocably breached. Percy was the last to emerge fully from his exhaustion. The Act of creation had taken a different kind of toll than the act of destruction. It had drained something from his core, leaving him feeling hollowed out but also profoundly peaceful. He accepted a towel from Asia, the warmth seeping into his skin, and watched his new family. He saw the easy way Kaneko leaned against Kiba, the quiet, understanding glance Akeno shared with Rias. They were a mosaic of broken pieces, from different worlds and warring ideologies, who had somehow, against all odds, fit themselves together into a single, cohesive whole. "It is done," Rias said, her voice filled with a quiet, steely satisfaction. She was looking at a communication circle, where a miniature, spectral image of her brother Circex was visible. "The seal is stable. Azazel's ward has been placed and amplified by our efforts." Circex's spectral form nodded, his expression one of immense relief. "The energy readings have stabilized across all factions. The tainted incidents have ceased. You and your peerage, and your allies, have done the impossible. The underworld, and indeed, all of the factions, owe you a debt that can never truly be repaid." His gaze shifted, seeming to look directly at Percy through the magical connection. "Especially you, Percy Jackson. What you did down there, our sensors registered an output of pure, creative energy that defies all our known models. You did not just patch the seal, you healed it." The weight of his words hung in the air. Percy had not just averted a crisis. He had introduced a new form of power into their world, one that was not destructive or holy or demonic, but restorative. Before the conversation could continue, the presences of Azazel and Michael joined the communication, their own spectral forms appearing beside Circex. The three faction leaders were once again assembled, their attention focused on the small clubhouse in Kuo. "The kid's a miracle worker," Azazel's voice boomed, full of genuine, scientific excitement. "We need to study this. Understand it. This life-giving water of his could change everything. It is a power that stems from a pure and selfless choice," Michael's serene voice added. "A power of grace. Heaven would be honored to act as its steward." Quote. The offers began again, a familiar chorus of temptation. Titles, resources, knowledge, divine favor. They were no longer just trying to recruit a powerful weapon. They were trying to claim a messiah. They saw his power as a resource to be controlled, a force to be leveraged in their eternal cosmic game. Percy stepped forward, into the view of the communication circle, cutting them off before they could continue. His weariness was still evident, but his eyes were clear and his voice was steady. "No," he said. The single word was not defiant or arrogant. It was a statement of absolute, unchangeable fact. "My power is not a resource. It is not a tool. And it is not for sale." He looked at the three most powerful beings in his world. "You want to repay your debt? Then leave us alone. Let us protect this town in our own way. Stop seeing Kuo as a strategic asset or a political pawn. See it as what it is, our home." He turned his back on the spectral leaders, a gesture of finality that was more powerful than any argument. He walked over to the window and looked out at the town lights, a silent declaration that the conversation was over. The was a moment of stunned silence from the communication circle. It was Rias who answered them, her voice filled with a new, unwavering authority that she had earned in the abyss. "You heard him," she said, her regal gaze sweeping over the three leaders. "Percy Jackson is an ally of the House of Grimoire. His will is our will. We will be the guardians of Kuo. That is our final answer." She ended the communication, plunging the room into a quiet, profound stillness. She had done it. She had stood with him, publicly severing the strings of control her brother and the other leaders had tried to place on them. She had chosen autonomy. She had chosen her family. In the days that followed, a new dawn truly did seem to break over Kuo. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by a feeling of peace. The students of the academy laughed and gossiped, blissfully unaware of the apocalyptic war that had been fought and won in the shadows of their classrooms. The orc returned to a semblance of its old routine. Though nothing would ever truly be the same. The training was more intense, the bonds were deeper, the stakes were now crystal clear. Zenobia and Irina became frequent, if still slightly awkward, visitors. The church, on Michael's direct orders, had reclassified Kuo as a joint jurisdiction territory, officially sanctioning their cooperation with the Grimoire peerage. Asia acted as the perfect bridge between them, her innate kindness smoothing over the rough edges of their centuries-old animosity. Akeno, having faced down the legacy of her father, seemed more at peace with herself, her smile more genuine. Her lightning seeming to crackle with a newfound, confident energy. Kiba's obsessive quest for revenge had been tempered into a fierce, protective duty to his living friends. The harem, which had been a political specter in the form of Riser's engagement, was now something else entirely. It was not a collection of conquests for Percy. It was a constellation, a network of powerful, independent women. Each with her own unique, profound bond to him, with him and Rias at the twin centers of their strange, supernatural family. It was a bond forged in loyalty with Rias, in empowerment with Akeno, in protection with Asia, in respect with Zenobia. It was a family of choice, not of contract. One evening, as the sun set, casting long, golden rays across the campus, Rias found Percy on the rooftop. His usual spot, he was watching the sky, his expression peaceful. "Thinking about your old life?" she asked softly, coming to stand beside him. "No," he replied, a faint smile on his lips. "I'm thinking about this one." He looked at her, his sea-green eyes clear and calm. "I finally understand now. Reincarnation. It wasn't a second chance. It was the first chance. To build something that was truly mine." She didn't need to ask what he meant. She was a part of it. The most important part. There was no grand confession of love, no dramatic kiss. There was no need. Their connection had been forged in the heart of the abyss and purified in the light of his sacrifice. It was a bond that transcended words. "The Guardian," Percy said quietly, his gaze turning distant. Before it faded back into the seal, it left me with a final warning. A message. Rias's expression grew serious. What was it? It said that by healing the seal with my power, I had created a resonance. An echo of life in the great void. It said that Erebus, the primordial nothingness, was no longer just a passive, corrupting influence. Percy turned to look at her, the setting sun casting his face in shadow. "It's aware of me now. It's not just leaking anymore. It's looking." The words hung in the air, a chilling promise of a future far more terrifying than anything they had faced before. They had won the battle for Kuo. They had defeated the fanatics and the madmen. But in doing so, they had merely attracted the attention of the true god of this war. The real battle, the one for existence itself, had just begun. Rias didn't flinch. She didn't show fear. She simply moved a little closer, her shoulder brushing against his, a silent, unwavering statement of solidarity. He was not alone. The aqueous anomaly was not a solitary island against the coming dark. He was the heart of a family, a king beside his queen, ready to face the endless night. Together, far away, in a place that was not a place, in a void between worlds where the concepts of time and space were meaningless, a formless, endless shadow stirred. For eons, it had been a quiet, patient entropy, its influence a slow, passive poison seeping through the cracks of creation. But now, for the first time in an age, it had a focus. It had felt a spark, an impossible, infuriating flicker of pure, creative, living energy that defied its very nature. It was a wrong note in the perfect, silent symphony of nothingness. The shadow, the great primordial Erebus, turned its gaze. Across the infinite canvas of reality, it focused on a single, insignificant little world. It focused on a small island nation. It focused on a town called Kuo. And it focused on the impossible spark of primordial water that dared to defy its endless night. Chapter 10 End.